Single dad broke his leg, saving a woman from a building fire. She owned the lottery company. But when he woke up, broke, broken, and hopeless, he had no idea the woman he dragged from the flames would hold the winning ticket to the rest of his life. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the pre-dawn silence as Jack Holloway moved carefully through his small kitchen, trying not to aggravate his aching back. Years of construction work had left their mark, but he couldn't afford to slow down, not with Emma depending on him. He glanced at the warning notice on the counter, its red letters seeming to glow in the dim light of the kitchen. 3 days late on rent again. Jack folded the paper and stuffed it into his pocket, not wanting Emma to see it. "Toast is almost ready, sweetheart." He called softly to his daughter, who sat at their worn kitchen table, her math homework spread out before her. Emma looked up, her pencil tapping against her chin. "Dad, can you help me with this word problem? It's about percentages." Jack pulled 2 slightly burned pieces of toast from the toaster and spread margarine on them. They'd run out of butter days ago. "Let me see what we've got there." He placed the toast on a chip plate and set it beside Emma's textbook. Leaning over her shoulder, he read the problem aloud. If Tommy has 75% of what Jane has, and Jane has $20, how much does Tommy have? Emma's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "I tried multiplying, but I'm not sure." "Okay, let's break it down." Jack pulled up a chair, ignoring the protest from his tired muscles. 75% is like saying 3/4 if Jane has $20. He grabbed a spare piece of paper and started drawing circles, dividing them into sections. The morning light slowly crept through their kitchen window as father and daughter worked through the problem together. Jack couldn't help but smile at Emma's determined expression. She had her mother's focus. That same way of pursing her lips when deep in thought. "So that means Tommy has $15. Emma exclaimed, her face lighting up with understanding. "That's my girl." Jack ruffled her hair gently. "Now eat your toast before it gets cold." He turned to the coffee maker, their one luxury item, rescued from a yard sale last summer. The machine sputtered and dripped, producing barely enough for 1 cup. Jack poured it into his thermos for later. He'd need the caffeine to get through another long day at the construction site. Emma munched on her toast, watching him with those observant eyes that sometimes seemed too wise for her 10 years. "Dad, are we okay?" Jack's hand paused as he screwed on the thermos lid. "Of course we are, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "I saw Mr. Peterson talking to you yesterday. He looked angry." Jack's chest tightened. Mr. Peterson, their landlord, had indeed cornered him yesterday, demanding the overdue rent. "Don't worry about Mr. Peterson," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "Everything's going to work out." Emma nodded, but Jack could see the worry lingering in her eyes. She'd grown up too fast after her mother passed, becoming too attuned to adult concerns. Sometimes he caught her checking price tags at the grocery store or suggesting they skip ordering pizza to save money. "Hey," Jack said, kneeling beside her chair, "remember what Mom used to say?" A small smile touched Emma's lips. "God never gives us more than we can handle." "That's right." Jack touched her nose gently. "And we're handling it, aren't we?" Emma nodded, her smile growing stronger. "We're a team. The best team." Jack stood, checking his watch. "Now finish up. Bus comes in 20 minutes. While Emma ate, Jack packed her lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and the last granola bar from the box. He'd skip lunch himself today. The overtime pay would help with the rent. The morning routine continued with its familiar rhythm. Emma brushed her teeth while Jack made her bed. She picked out her clothes, the pink sweater her grandmother had given her for Christmas, while he double-checked her backpack for homework. As Emma tied her shoes, Jack caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The circles under his eyes were darker than usual, his face lined with worry, but he plastered on a smile when Emma looked up at him. "Got everything?" he asked. "Yep." She patted her backpack. "Oh wait, almost forgot." She ran back to her room and returned with a small paper crane. "For your truck, for good luck." Jack's throat tightened as he accepted the delicate creation. Emma had been folding paper cranes ever since learning about the Japanese tradition in school. 1,000 cranes for a wish. He carefully tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Perfect timing," he said as they heard the rumble of the school bus outside. "Coat on, young lady." Emma slipped into her jacket, a bit too small now, but it would have to last until next winter, and gave him a quick hug. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Have a great day at school." He watched from the doorway as she climbed onto the bus, waving until it disappeared around the corner. Then he allowed his shoulders to sag, the weight of their situation settling back onto him. The drive to work was quiet, his old truck protesting against the cold morning air. Jack touched the paper crane in his pocket, thinking about Emma's unwavering faith in him. He had to find a way to make things work. Maybe he could pick up some weekend work, or see if any of the other sites needed extra hands. Traffic slowed to a crawl as he approached downtown, giving him an unwanted moment to think about the mounting bills, the rent notice, the empty kitchen cabinets. But he pushed those thoughts aside as he pulled into the construction site parking lot. He couldn't afford distractions, not in his line of work. "Just another day," he muttered to himself, grabbing his hard hat and tool belt. "Just get through another day." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Jack's old pickup truck rumbled down Cedar Street. His shoulders ached from hauling lumber all day, and his worn work boots felt heavy on the pedals. The construction site had been especially demanding today, rushing to meet impossible deadlines while short-staffed, as usual. He adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the photo of Emma he'd tucked into the corner. Her smile, so much like her mother's, gave him the strength to push through days like this. Soon he'd be home, helping her with her science project about the solar system. The thought brought a tired smile to his weathered face. The familiar route home took him past the Oakwood Apartments, a tired 3-story building that had seen better days. Jack had done some repair work there last summer, fixing loose railings and patching leaky pipes for old Mrs. Henderson, who always insisted on paying him with homemade cookies despite his protests. Something was different today. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he noticed dark smoke billowing from one of the upper windows. His heart began to race as he saw orange flames flickering behind the glass. Without hesitation, he pulled his truck to the curb, tires screeching against the pavement. In the distance, sirens wailed their urgent song, but they sounded too far away. Jack jumped out of his truck, leaving the door wide open. The heat hit him first, waves of it rolling off the building like an invisible tide. Then came the acrid smell of burning plastic and wood. Several residents stood on the lawn, some still in their pajamas, others clutching precious belongings they'd managed to grab. Mrs. Henderson was among them, wrapped in a thin bathrobe, her face streaked with soot. "Jack," she called out, her voice trembling. "Thank God you're here. Mr. Collins is still up there, 3rd floor. He has trouble walking, and nobody can reach him." The flames were spreading quickly now, eating their way across the facade like hungry fingers. Black smoke poured from multiple windows, and Jack could hear the ominous crack of timber giving way somewhere inside. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to wait for the firefighters, but another voice, the one that had gotten him through the hardest days after losing Sarah, wouldn't let him stand idle while someone needed help. Jack shrugged off his work jacket and pulled his t-shirt up over his nose. The building's entrance was still clear, though smoke was beginning to cascade down the stairwell like a dark waterfall. He took a deep breath of clean air and charged forward. The heat inside was stifling, and the smoke made his eyes water immediately. The familiar hallway had transformed into something alien and threatening. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the haze, and the crackle of flames seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Hello!" Jack's voice boomed against the walls. "Anyone here? Call out if you can hear me." He took the stairs 2 at a time, keeping low where the air was clearer. The 2nd floor was bad, but the 3rd was worse. The smoke was so thick he could barely see 3 feet ahead. The wallpaper was bubbling from the heat, and pieces of ceiling were starting to fall. "Mr. Collins?" Jack shouted between coughs. "It's Jack Holloway. Where are you?" A weak cry came from somewhere down the hall, followed by the sound of coughing. Jack pressed forward, using the wall as a guide. The floor creaked ominously beneath his feet, and he could feel the heat of the flames through his work boots. "Keep calling out!" he yelled, his throat raw from the smoke. "I'm coming to get you!" The sound of splintering wood echoed through the building, followed by a crash that shook the entire floor. Jack stumbled but kept moving. Somewhere behind him, a window exploded from the heat, sending shards of glass skittering across the floor. Through the chaos, he heard another sound, a woman's scream, coming from behind a door to his right. It wasn't Mr. Collins, but someone else was trapped up here too. The smoke was getting thicker, and the roar of the flames grew louder with each passing second. "Hello?" he called out again, his voice hoarse. "I'm here to help. Keep making noise so I can find you." The building groaned around him like a wounded animal. Through the smoke, Jack could see orange flames licking at the ceiling, spreading rapidly. The heat was becoming unbearable, and his lungs burned with each breath. But somewhere in this inferno, people needed help. He pressed forward, feeling his way along the wall, calling out again and again. The sirens were closer now, but Jack knew the firefighters might not make it in time. Time was running out, and he was these people's only hope. "If anyone can hear me," he shouted over the roar of the flames, "make some noise, I'm coming to help." Thick black smoke poured from the windows of the 3-story apartment building as Jack sprinted across the parking lot. His heart pounded against his ribs, but years of construction work had taught him to think clearly under pressure. The wailing sirens still sounded distant, too distant. "Is anyone still inside?" He shouted to a group of coughing residents huddled near the entrance. "Mr. Peterson, 3rd floor," someone called out. "He has trouble walking." Jack pulled his t-shirt over his nose and mouth. The cotton wouldn't filter much, but it was better than nothing. Heat blasted his face as he charged through the front door. The lobby was hazy with smoke, but he could still see well enough to locate the stairwell. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, Jack's boots thundered against the metal steps. The smoke grew thicker with each floor. By the time he reached the 3rd floor landing, he had to crouch low to breathe. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel of gray fog. "Mr. Peterson!" His voice was hoarse from the smoke. "Anyone here?" A weak cough answered from somewhere down the hall. Jack pressed forward, staying close to the floor where the air was clearer. The heat pressed against him like a physical weight. Sweat ran down his face, stinging his eyes. The first door he tried was locked. The second swung open to reveal an empty apartment. At the third, he heard movement inside. "Mr. Peterson?" Jack called, pushing the door open. An elderly man in striped pajamas sat on the floor near a window, gasping for air. "Can't walk," he wheezed. "I've got you, sir." Jack wrapped an arm around the man's waist and helped him to his feet. "Lean on me." They made slow progress down the hallway. Mr. Peterson's legs kept buckling, forcing Jack to practically carry him. The smoke was getting worse. Somewhere above them, wood crackled ominously. Finally reaching the stairwell, Jack helped Mr. Peterson begin the descent. A firefighter was charging up the stairs and quickly took charge of the elderly man. "Anyone else up there?" the firefighter asked. "I'll make one more sweep," Jack said, already turning back. "Sir, you need to evacuate." But Jack was already pushing through the smoke-filled corridor again. Something in his gut told him to check one more time. The heat was becoming unbearable now. His lungs burned with each breath. That's when he heard it. A faint cry from the far end of the hall. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone there?" Another cry, barely audible, over the roar of the flames. Jack stumbled forward, keeping one hand on the wall to stay oriented in the thickening smoke. The paint was hot under his palm. The sound led him to a door at the end of the hall. He tried the handle. Stuck. He could hear labored breathing on the other side. "Stand back from the door," he shouted. Jack took 2 steps back, then launched his shoulder against the door. Pain shot through his arm, but the door held. He kicked next, channeling every ounce of strength into his steel-toed work boot. The frame splintered on the third kick. Inside, a woman in business attire lay unconscious near a desk. The room was filling rapidly with smoke. Jack dropped to his knees beside her, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak but steady. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. The woman's face was streaked with soot, her breathing shallow. Jack knew he had to get her out immediately. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she felt. The hallway had become an inferno. Flames licked up the walls, and the ceiling groaned overhead. Jack hunched over the woman protectively, trying to shield her face from the worst of the heat. 20 feet to the stairwell, 15 feet, 10 feet. A thunderous crack split the air. Jack looked up to see a burning support beam breaking free from the ceiling. Time seemed to slow down. In that stretched moment, he made a choice. He twisted, making sure the woman's body was clear, but there wasn't time to get himself completely out of the way. The beam crashed down onto his right leg with crushing force. White-hot pain exploded through his body. The world tilted sideways. Jack's vision swam, dark spots dancing at the edges. Through the haze of pain, he was dimly aware of heavy boots pounding up the stairs. Firefighters in full gear appeared through the smoke like angels in yellow. The last thing he saw was the woman being lifted safely away from him. Then the pain and smoke finally overwhelmed him, and everything faded to black. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled Jack from darkness, its rhythmic pulse cutting through the fog that had settled over his mind. His eyelids felt heavy, weighted down like lead blankets, and his mouth was as dry as sandpaper left in the desert. Sunday, the sharp, antiseptic smell of hospital air filled his nostrils as consciousness slowly returned, bringing with it a dull ache that seemed to radiate from everywhere at once. He tried to move his right leg but found it wouldn't budge. Something heavy was weighing it down, immobilizing him completely. The room came into focus gradually, like adjusting the lens on an old camera. Pale yellow walls, white ceiling tiles with water stains, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Through blurry vision, he made out Emma's small form curled up in a chair beside his bed, her math textbook still open on her lap like she'd fallen asleep while doing homework. Someone had draped a thin hospital blanket over her shoulders, the blue fabric rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Her face looked serene in sleep, but dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd been there for hours, maintaining her vigil. "Ah, Mr. Holloway. Good to see you're awake." A doctor in a white coat stepped into the room, her shoes making soft squeaking sounds on the polished linoleum floor. She spoke in hushed tones to avoid waking Emma, her voice carrying the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered both good news and bad countless times. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Small laugh lines around her eyes suggested someone who found reasons to smile, even in difficult circumstances. "I'm Dr. Chen. You've been out for about 16 hours. Jack tried to speak, but his throat felt like he'd swallowed broken glass. The effort sent him into a fit of dry coughing that made his ribs protest sharply. Dr. Chen quickly poured him a cup of water from a plastic pitcher on the bedside table and helped him take small sips through a bent straw, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. "My leg?" he managed to croak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Broken in 2 places," Dr. Chen said matter-of-factly, checking his vital signs on the monitor with practiced efficiency. The numbers glowed green against the black screen: blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels. "The falling beam did some significant damage, but you were incredibly lucky. It could have been much worse. A few inches higher and we might be having a very different conversation." She adjusted his IV drip slightly. "We've set it properly with pins and plates, and with some physical therapy, you should make a full recovery. Though it will take time, several months at minimum, several months." The words hit him like a physical blow. How was he supposed to work? How would he pay the bills? Emma's school supplies? Their rent that was already 2 weeks late? Memory flooded back in vivid, uncomfortable detail. The burning building with its acrid smoke and unbearable heat. The elderly man he'd helped out first, his grateful tears mixing with soot on his weathered face. And then? "The woman," he said urgently, trying to sit up despite the pain. "In apartment 3B. Did she?" "Doctor." Chen's face brightened, and she gently pressed his shoulder back against the pillows. "Both people you saved are alive and well, thanks to you. The elderly gentleman, Mr. Rodriguez, was treated for smoke inhalation and released this morning. His family wanted me to tell you they're forever in your debt." She paused, glancing at his chart with a slight smile. "The woman you pulled from 3B was Margaret Delaney. She's being treated for smoke inhalation and some minor burns on her hands, but she'll make a complete recovery." Jack closed his eyes in relief, feeling a weight lift from his chest that had nothing to do with his bruised ribs. He'd made it in time. Both of them were safe. Then the name registered, cutting through his medication-induced haze. "Margaret Delaney? As in, the CEO of Heartland Lottery?" "Yes." "Doctor?" Chen's smile widened. "You're something of a local hero, Mr. Holloway. The newspapers are calling you the single dad who saved the lottery queen. Channel 7. News has been calling every hour asking for an interview." Jack groaned, sinking deeper into his pillows. The last thing he wanted was attention. He hadn't done anything special. He'd just done what anyone would have done, what anyone should do when people needed help. His eyes drifted to Emma, still sleeping soundly, her small hand curled under her cheek. "How long has she been here?" "Your daughter arrived with your sister-in-law right after you were brought in last night. She refused to leave, even when we told her visiting hours were over." Dr. Chen's expression softened, and she glanced fondly at Emma. "She's quite determined, that one. The nurses have been bringing her crackers and juice boxes. She told me she needed to make sure you were breathing properly." "That's my girl," Jack whispered, his heart swelling with love and guilt in equal measure. Emma had already lost her mother. She must have been terrified when she heard about the fire. The thought of putting her through that kind of fear again made his chest tighten. A nurse entered with fresh bandages and pain medication, her scrubs decorated with cartoon characters that seemed designed to make children smile. As she checked his IV and replaced his bandages with gentle efficiency, Jack tried to sit up straighter, wincing as sharp pain shot through his leg and into his hip. "Easy there," the nurse cautioned, her voice warm but firm. "The pain medication will kick in soon. You've got some pretty bruised ribs, too, and your left shoulder took a beating." No sudden movements for a while. Emma stirred in her chair, stretching like a cat waking from a nap. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they landed on Jack's face. When she saw he was awake and alert, her whole face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" She scrambled out of the chair, the math book tumbling to the floor with a soft thud, and carefully hugged him around the neck, mindful of the wires and tubes. "Hey, sweetheart," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. He could feel her small body trembling slightly against him, could smell the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with the antiseptic hospital air. "I'm okay. Everything's going to be fine." "I was so scared," Emma whispered against his shoulder, her voice muffled. "Aunt Sarah got a phone call and started crying. Then she said you ran into a fire to save people. Why did you do that? What if you died like Mommy?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Jack stroked her hair, marveling at how much it reminded him of her mother's, the same golden brown color, the same way it curled slightly at the ends. "Sometimes, honey, when others need help, we have to be brave, even when we're scared, even when it's dangerous." Emma pulled back, her expression serious beyond her 10 years, those blue eyes that were so much like her mother's, studying his face intently. "Like Mom was brave when she was sick?" "Yeah," Jack said softly, his throat tightening. "Just like that. She fought so hard to stay with us, didn't she?" Emma nodded solemnly, then leaned against him again, this time more gently. "The nurse said, 'You're a hero.' Are you famous now?" Despite everything, Jack almost smiled. "I'm not a hero, Em. I just did what felt right." Dr. Chen cleared her throat gently, her pen clicking as she finished making notes on his chart. "I'll leave you two to catch up. But Mr. Holloway, you should know, there's someone else who's been asking to see you. She's been quite persistent, actually." As if summoned by their conversation, a soft knock echoed on the doorframe. A woman stood there, elegant even in a standard-issue hospital gown, holding a bouquet of yellow roses that seemed to glow in the harsh, fluorescent light. She had silver-streaked dark hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders and carried herself with natural authority, despite leaning slightly on a wooden cane. Her face bore a few small bandages where debris had scraped her during the fire, but her eyes were clear and intense as they met Jack's. Intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the steady beep of monitors and the distant chatter of the nurses' station down the hall. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice carrying a weight of emotion that filled the small room. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, casting warm squares of light across Jack's bed. His leg throbbed beneath the cast, but the pain medication kept the worst of it at bay. Emma sat cross-legged in the visitor's chair, her math homework spread across her lap. A gentle knock drew their attention to the door. Margaret Delaney stood there, holding 2 paper coffee cups and a small pink bag. "Good morning," she said, her elegant voice carrying warmth that matched the morning light. "I thought you might need this." She placed one of the coffees on Jack's bedside table. "Mrs. Delaney, you really don't have to," Jack started, but Emma cut him off. "Thank you, Miss Maggie." Emma bounced up from her chair, careful not to scatter her homework. "Is that hot chocolate for me?" Maggie's eyes crinkled with delight. "Indeed it is, dear. And please, both of you just call me Maggie." She handed Emma the pink bag. "I also brought you some colored pencils. Your father mentioned you like to draw." Jack watched his daughter's face light up. The simple gift meant the world to her. He could tell by the way she hugged the bag to her chest. His throat tightened. These past few days, Maggie had shown such kindness, visiting every morning without fail. "The newspaper called again," Maggie said, settling into the chair beside Emma. "They're running another story tomorrow. The lottery hero. They're calling you now." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I'm no hero. Anyone would have done the same." "That's not true, Daddy," Emma said firmly. "You're the bravest person ever." Maggie nodded in agreement. Your daughter's right, Jack. Not everyone would rush into a burning building to save strangers. The local news had been covering the story extensively. Jack's heroic rescue of both an elderly neighbor and the CEO of Heartland Lottery had captured the public's imagination. He'd seen the headlines, "Single dad risks all to save others," and "Construction worker's courage saves lottery magnate. How's the pain today?" Maggie asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "Manageable," Jack replied, taking a sip of the coffee, rich and perfect, nothing like the hospital's watered-down brew. "The doctors say I'll need physical therapy once the cast comes off." Emma looked up from her new colored pencils. "But Daddy, how will you work?" The question hung heavy in the air. Jack's construction job required him to be on his feet all day, climbing, scaffolding, carrying materials. With his injury, that wouldn't be possible for months. "We'll figure something out, sweetie," he said, trying to keep the worry from his voice. Maggie watched this exchange, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Jack, I meant what I said about covering your medical expenses." "Mrs. Delaney, Maggie, I appreciate the offer, but please," she interrupted gently, "let me do this. You saved my life." Jack looked down at his hands, calloused from years of hard work. Pride warred with practicality in his mind. The hospital bills would be enormous, and with no income coming in. Emma touched his arm. "Daddy, remember what Pastor Mike always says about accepting God's blessings?" A small laugh escaped him. "Using my own lessons against me, huh?" Maggie smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Smart girl you've got there, Jack." The morning passed pleasantly as Maggie shared stories about her company's charitable initiatives. Emma listened intently, occasionally adding her own observations that made both adults laugh. Jack found himself relaxing, drawn in by Maggie's easy manner and genuine interest in their lives. "Did you know," Maggie said to Emma, "that your father saved not just me, but Mr. Peterson from 2 amperes as well? That sweet old man brings me tomatoes from his balcony garden every summer." Emma beamed with pride. "That's because Daddy always helps people. He fixed Mrs. Rodriguez's sink last month and wouldn't take any money for it." "Emma," Jack protested, but Maggie was already smiling. "That doesn't surprise me one bit," she said. "Your father is a special person, Emma. The world needs more people like him." The nurse came in to check Jack's vitals, and Emma took the opportunity to show Maggie her drawings. Jack watched them together, his daughter's small hand gesturing excitedly, Maggie's elegant head bent close, offering genuine praise and encouragement. When visiting hours drew to a close, Maggie gathered her things. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. "And Jack, please think about what I said, about the medical expenses." After she left, Emma curled up next to Jack's bed, working on a new drawing with her colored pencils. "I like Miss Maggie," she said simply. "She reminds me of Grandma Mary." Jack's mother had passed away 2 years ago, and the comparison struck him. There was something maternal about Maggie's presence, something that went beyond mere gratitude for his actions. Later that afternoon, while Emma was getting a snack from the cafeteria with their neighbor Mrs. Martinez, who had come to help, Maggie returned briefly. She spoke quietly with the head nurse at the station, her checkbook open on the counter. The nurse nodded repeatedly, making notes in the computer. "Remember," Maggie said softly, "not a word to Mr. Holloway until discharge. I want him to focus on healing, not worrying about bills." The nurse smiled knowingly. "Of course, Mrs. Delaney. We understand." Maggie looked back at Jack's room, where he had finally drifted off to sleep, his face peaceful for the first time in days. A gentle smile touched her lips before she turned and walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Jack balanced precariously on his crutches in the tiny kitchen of their apartment, trying to reach a coffee mug from the upper cabinet. His injured leg, wrapped in a bulky cast, hung uselessly as he stretched. The mug slipped from his fingertips and shattered on the linoleum floor. "Daddy?" Emma called from her bedroom. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just dropped something." He stared at the broken pieces, feeling as fragmented as the ceramics scattered across the floor. 2 weeks home from the hospital, and even the simplest tasks felt like climbing mountains. The phone rang, making him jump. He hobbled to the counter where his cell phone buzzed against the worn surface. The screen displayed Peterson Construction. "Hello?" Jack's throat tightened as he recognized his boss's voice. "Jack, it's Bill." There was a heavy pause. "Listen, I've been talking with HR and the insurance company." Jack closed his eyes, already knowing what was coming. He lowered himself onto one of the kitchen chairs, the crutches clattering against the table. "The liability is too high, Jack, with your injury." Bill's voice cracked slightly. "We can't hold your position. Doctor says it'll be months before you're cleared for site work, and we've got deadlines to meet." The words hit like physical blows. Jack pressed his free hand against his forehead, trying to steady his breathing. "I understand, Bill. You're one of our best, Jack. When you're healed up, come see me first. But right now," Bill cleared his throat, "your final check will be deposited Friday. We're including 2 weeks severance. Thanks." The word came out hollow. After hanging up, Jack sat motionless at the kitchen table. The broken mug still lay scattered on the floor, a fitting metaphor for his life right now. The morning light caught the edges of the eviction warning notice on the counter. Their third one. Without his job, there wouldn't be any way to catch up on the back rent. Emma appeared in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "The bus will be here soon." Jack forced a smile. "Got everything you need for school?" She nodded, then pointed at the broken mug. "I can clean that up before I go." No, I've got it, Princess. You'll be late." He pushed himself up, grabbing the crutches. "Come here, give your old dad a hug." Emma wrapped her arms around his waist, careful to avoid bumping his injured leg. "You sure you're okay? You look sad." "Just tired," he lied, hating the deception but wanting to protect her from adult worries. "Have a good day at school." After Emma left, Jack spent nearly 20 minutes cleaning up the broken mug, his movements awkward and painful with the crutches. The simple task left him sweating and frustrated. He'd never felt so useless in his life. The morning crawled by. Jack made phone calls to the unemployment office, to his insurance company, to a few other construction firms in the area. The responses were all the same. Nobody wanted to take a chance on an injured worker, no matter how experienced. By afternoon, his leg was throbbing despite the pain medication. He'd pushed himself too hard trying to clean the apartment, wanting it to look nice for Emma when she got home. The doctor's words echoed in his head. Full recovery could take 6 months or more. 6 months! The thought made his stomach clench. The mail slot clicked, and envelopes fluttered to the floor. Jack maneuvered over to collect them, nearly losing his balance in the process. Bills, advertisements, and a formal-looking letter from the hospital's billing department. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. The initial coverage from Maggie Delaney would only go so far, and the physical therapy sessions were adding up. A sharp knock at the door made him jump. Through the peephole, he saw Mr. Chin, their landlord, walking away. Something white was taped to the door. Jack's hand shook as he opened it. The paper was official-looking, with bold letters across the top. Notice of eviction. 3 days. They had 3 days to pay the back rent or vacate the premises. He limped back to the couch, the notice crumpled in his fist. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room floor, marking time's steady march toward evening. Emma would be home soon, probably full of stories about her day, maybe excited about something she'd learned in science class. It was her favorite subject. How could he tell her they might lose their home? That Daddy couldn't work anymore? That all his efforts to keep their little world stable had crumbled like that broken mug on the kitchen floor? The sound of the school bus's brakes squealing outside made him quickly wipe his eyes. A moment later, Emma bounded through the door, her ponytail swinging. "Daddy, look what I drew in art class!" She pulled a colorful paper from her backpack and settled beside him on the couch. It was a picture of their apartment building, with 2 stick figures out front, one tall, one small, holding hands. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." His voice barely held steady. Emma spread her art supplies across the coffee table and began working on a new drawing, humming softly to herself. Jack sat in silence beside her, the eviction notice burning a hole in his pocket, watching his daughter color her bright pictures in a world that still made sense to her. The setting sun painted the walls orange, then pink, then purple, but Jack barely noticed. He was lost in calculations, trying to figure out how to make numbers add up differently, how to turn nothing into something, how to keep his daughter's world from falling apart. Emma worked on her drawing, oblivious to her father's distress, adding splashes of yellow and blue to her paper, while Jack sat motionless beside her, drowning in the silence of his fears. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of Jack's small apartment, casting long shadows across the cramped living room. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at bills spread before him, his crutches propped against the wall nearby. Emma had just left for school, her cheerful goodbye still echoing in his ears, making the harsh reality of their situation even harder to bear. A gentle knock at the door startled him. He quickly gathered the bills, shoving them under a magazine, and grabbed his crutches. The movement sent a sharp pain through his injured leg. "Coming," he called, awkwardly maneuvering toward the door. Through the peephole, he saw Maggie Delaney's elegant figure, her silver hair neatly styled, holding what appeared to be grocery bags. Jack's face flushed with embarrassment as he opened the door. "Mrs. Delaney, this is unexpected. Please, it's Maggie," she said warmly, lifting the bags. "I brought some essentials. I hope you don't mind." Before he could protest, she had already stepped inside, her eyes taking in the modest apartment. Jack noticed her gaze pause briefly on the eviction notice that had fallen to the floor near the door. He hadn't managed to hide it in time. "Let me help you with those bags," he said quickly, trying to distract her. "Absolutely not. You'll sit right back down, Jack Holloway." Her tone was gentle but firm, reminding him of his late mother. "Where's your kitchen?" He watched helplessly as she found her way there, setting the bags on the counter and beginning to unpack them. Fresh fruit, vegetables, bread, and other staples emerged one by one. "Mrs. Delaney, Maggie, this isn't necessary. I can't accept." "You can, and you will," she interrupted, placing a carton of milk in his nearly empty refrigerator. "Consider it part of my ongoing thank you for saving my life." Jack sank into a kitchen chair, his leg throbbing. "I would have done that for anyone." "I know." Maggie paused her unpacking, turning to face him. "That's exactly why. I'm here." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, her expression serious but kind. "I saw the notice by the door, Jack." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "It's temporary. I'll figure something out." "I'm sure you will," she agreed. "But I have a proposition that might help speed things along." She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, placing it on the table between them. "Heartland Lottery needs someone to oversee facilities maintenance at our main office." Jack stared at the card, not reaching for it. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's an opportunity," Maggie countered. "The position's been open for weeks, light duty, perfect while you're healing. The pay is good, and it comes with full benefits." She leaned forward slightly. Emma would be covered too. At the mention of his daughter's name, Jack's resistance wavered. He thought of her worn-out sneakers, the field trips he couldn't afford, the college fund that remained empty. "I don't know anything about office work," he admitted. "You know about buildings, about repairs, about managing projects. That's what we need." Maggie's voice softened. "Jack, accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing we can do for those who depend on us." He picked up the business card, running his thumb over the embossed logo. The paper was thick, expensive. Everything about it spoke of a world far removed from his own. "I can't make any promises," he said finally. "All I'm asking is that you think about it." Maggie stood, smoothing her skirt. "The position starts whenever you're ready." She walked to the door, then paused. "You know, Jack, some people win the lottery with numbers. Others win it by being exactly who they are, exactly when someone needs them." After she left, Jack sat at the kitchen table, turning the business card over and over in his hands. The morning light caught the gold lettering, making it shimmer. His eyes drifted to Emma's school photo on the refrigerator, her smile bright and hopeful, then to the eviction notice still lying by the door. The business card felt impossibly heavy in his hands, weighted with promise and pride, opportunity and obligation. He placed it on the table, staring at it as if it might whisper the right answer to him. Jack Holloway stood before the gleaming glass doors of Heartland Lottery's headquarters, his reflection distorted in the morning sunlight. His borrowed suit jacket felt stiff and uncomfortable, a far cry from his usual work clothes. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, feeling like an imposter in this world of polished marble and designer suits. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, releasing a blast of cool air. Jack gripped his crutches tighter and made his way into the vast lobby. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. The click of his crutches echoed against the marble, drawing attention from the steady stream of employees heading to their offices. A young security guard approached, his expression uncertain. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm Jack Holloway. I'm supposed to meet Miss Khan." "Delaney." Recognition flickered across the guard's face. "Oh, yes, sir. She mentioned you'd be coming. Please, let me escort you to the reception desk." At the circular desk, a professionally dressed woman looked up from her computer. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized him from the news coverage. "Mr. Holloway, welcome to Heartland Lottery. Miss Delaney asked us to expect you." She made a quick call, and within minutes, the elevator doors opened to reveal Maggie Delaney herself. She wore a tailored navy suit, but her warm smile broke through any corporate formality. "Jack, right on time." She walked over, her heels clicking against the floor. "How's the leg this morning?" "Managing," he replied, trying not to show how much it ached. "Thank you again for this opportunity, Miss Delaney." "Maggie, please, we're past formalities, don't you think?" She gestured toward the elevator. "Shall we? There are some people I'd like you to meet." As they rode up to the executive floor, Jack noticed how employees in the elevator stood a little straighter in Maggie's presence. Yet their smiles were genuine. She greeted each by name, asking about family members or recent events in their lives. The executive floor bustled with activity. Maggie led him through an open office space where dozens of people worked at modern desks. Conversations hushed as they passed, followed by whispered exchanges and curious glances. "Everyone," Maggie announced, her voice carrying across the floor, "I'd like you to meet Jack Holloway. He'll be working with us as a consultant for facilities and safety improvements." She turned to Jack. "Jack brings years of construction experience and a unique perspective on building safety that will be invaluable to our company." A round of welcoming applause broke out, making Jack's ears redden. He nodded awkwardly, unused to such attention. Maggie introduced him to key staff members: Sarah from Human Resources, who would handle his paperwork; Tom from Facilities, who would be his immediate supervisor; and various department heads who would need his input on their areas. "Your office is this way," Maggie said, leading him down a corridor. "Office?" Jack stopped short. "I thought I'd be working in maintenance or—" "Jack?" Maggie interrupted gently. "You're here as a consultant. Your experience is valuable, and we're treating it as such." She opened a door to reveal a modest but well-appointed office with large windows overlooking the city. "This is too much," he protested. "It's exactly enough," Maggie countered. "Now Tom will be by shortly to brief you on our current projects. Make yourself comfortable." Throughout the day, Jack found himself immersed in building plans, safety protocols, and facility reports. His practical experience allowed him to spot potential issues others had missed, and Tom seemed genuinely appreciative of his input. During lunch, several employees invited him to join them in the break room. They were curious about his background but respectful, and Jack found himself gradually relaxing as they shared stories about their own experiences with the company. By late afternoon, Jack had already drafted several recommendations for improving emergency exits and updating the sprinkler system. His leg throbbed, but the work had been engaging enough to help him push through the discomfort. As the workday drew to a close, he gathered his things and headed for the elevator. Two young employees were already inside when he entered, engrossed in conversation. They fell quiet as he stepped in, but he could hear their whispered exchange. "That's the guy who saved the boss's life." "Really? The one from the fire?" "Yeah. Did you see the news? He got hurt pulling her out." Jack kept his eyes forward, but for the first time in years, he felt a genuine smile tugging at his lips. Not because of their words, but because for the first time since losing his wife, he felt like he might have found a place where he could rebuild. As the elevator descended, he thought of Emma and how proud she'd be when he told her about his day. The smile stayed with him as he made his way through the lobby, past the security guard, who gave him a respectful nod, and out into the evening air. The weight of the eviction notice seemed a little lighter, and the ache in his leg a little more bearable. For once, the path ahead didn't seem quite so dark. Jack settled into his new routine at Heartland Lottery with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else in his life. The maintenance office they'd given him was really a converted storage room on the first floor, but he'd made it his own with a few personal touches. A crayon drawing from Emma pinned to the wall and a worn leather tool belt hanging on a hook. "Morning, Mr. Holloway," the security guard, Pete, called out as Jack checked the building's service entrance. "How's that leg doing today?" "Getting stronger," Jack replied with a slight smile, adjusting his weight on his crutches. "And please, just Jack is fine." He worked his way through his morning checklist, testing emergency exits and checking the building systems. The fancy digital maintenance tracking system had intimidated him at first, but he'd learned it quickly enough. His construction experience helped him spot issues others might miss. Around mid-morning, Laura Jensen, Maggie's assistant, found him inspecting a loose handrail in the stairwell. She carried a steaming cup of coffee and wore a kind smile. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering the cup. "It's quite different from construction work, isn't it?" Jack accepted the coffee gratefully. "Sure is. Never thought I'd be working in a place like this. Thank you, miss." Jensen. "Laura, please." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know, everyone's been talking about how thorough you are. The maintenance crew says you caught things they missed for months." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing my job. These old buildings, they talk to you if you listen close enough." Throughout the day, employees would stop to chat as he worked. Some asked about the fire, others just wanted to share their own stories. Jack listened more than he spoke, but he found himself warming to these brief connections. At 3 o'clock, Emma bounced through the lobby doors, her backpack covered in cartoon stickers and her eyes wide with excitement. She'd been thrilled when Jack suggested she could do her homework in his office after school instead of going to the neighbor's house. "Daddy!" She ran to him, careful not to bump his injured leg. "Can I see Miss Maggie today?" "Let's see if she's busy first, sweetheart." Jack smoothed her hair. "Remember what we talked about?" Emma nodded solemnly. "This is your work now, and we have to be professional." She pronounced the last word carefully, making Jack smile. They made their way to his office, where Emma settled at the small table he'd set up for her. She pulled out her math homework while Jack reviewed maintenance requests on his tablet. Laura stopped by with a small package of cookies for Emma. "These were left over from the board meeting," she said with a wink. "Can't let them go to waste." "Thank you, Miss Laura." Emma's face lit up. "Did you know my daddy fixed the squeaky door on the 3rd floor today? He says every building has its own voice." Laura smiled warmly. "Your daddy's very good at what he does." She glanced at Jack with admiration. "We're lucky to have him here." After finishing his final rounds, Jack gathered Emma's things. They'd stayed later than usual because he'd wanted to complete a safety inspection report. "Ready to head home, kiddo?" he asked, watching Emma pack up her colored pencils. "Can we make chili tonight?" she asked hopefully. "Like we used to?" "You bet." Jack ruffled her hair. "Though maybe we should make something fancier now that we're office people." He affected an exaggerated posh accent that made Emma giggle. In their small kitchen at home, Jack showed Emma how to measure out the spices for their favorite chili recipe. She stood on a step stool, carefully adding ingredients to the pot while he chopped vegetables one-handed, his crutches leaning against the counter. "Daddy?" Emma stirred the pot with concentration. "Do you like working at Heartland?" Jack paused, considering. "You know what? I think I do. It's different, but good different." "Me too." Emma nodded wisely. "And Miss Laura is so nice. She reminds me of Mom, a little bit." Jack's heart squeezed at the unexpected comment. He watched his daughter taste test the chili with careful seriousness, her face scrunched in concentration. "More cumin?" she asked, already reaching for the spice jar. "Sure thing, Chef Emma," Jack chuckled. "But go easy. We're fancy office folks now, remember? Gotta keep our sophisticated palates." Emma dissolved into giggles, and Jack felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the simmering pot of chili. Maybe this new chapter in their lives wouldn't be so bad after all. They sat at their small kitchen table, steam rising from their bowls. Emma had insisted on using their fancy cloth napkins, a garage sale find from last summer, to match their new status as office people. "You know what, Daddy?" Emma said between spoonfuls. "I think Mom would be proud of us." Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I think so too, sweetheart. I think so too." The company cafe at Heartland Lottery occupied the entire 5th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Jack felt out of place among the well-dressed executives as he made his way to a corner table where Maggie sat waiting. Emma bounced alongside him, her backpack decorated with colorful pins swaying with each step. "Miss Maggie!" Emma called out, waving enthusiastically. Maggie's face lit up. She stood to greet them, elegant in her navy business suit, but with a warmth that seemed to soften her professional exterior. "There's my favorite duo. I ordered us some special treats." Jack eased himself into a chair, carefully propping his crutches against the wall. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Maggie." "Nonsense," she replied, watching as Emma settled into the seat between them. "Besides, I hardly ever use this beautiful space. It's nice to have company for a change." A waiter appeared with 3 plates of grilled chicken sandwiches, crispy fries, and fresh fruit on the side. Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the perfectly arranged food. "Daddy, look! The sandwich is cut like a heart." Jack noticed how Maggie watched Emma with a mixture of joy and something deeper, a shadow of longing that crossed her face when she thought no one was looking. They ate and chatted about Emma's school day, her excitement about the upcoming science fair, and Jack's progress with his new duties. The conversation flowed easily, comfortable despite their different backgrounds. "You know," Maggie said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "I used to bring my Timothy here when the building first opened." Her voice softened at the name. "He loved watching the construction crews across the street." Emma looked up from her fruit cup. "Who's Timothy?" Jack noticed Maggie's hands trembling slightly as she set down her water glass. He wanted to change the subject, to protect her from what was clearly a painful memory, but Maggie continued. "Timothy was my son," she said quietly. "He was just about your age, Emma, 10 years old and full of questions about everything." The cafe seemed to grow quieter, as if the space itself was holding its breath. Jack watched Maggie's face, seeing the careful composure she usually maintained begin to crack. "What happened to him?" Emma asked with the gentle directness only children possess. "There was an accident," Maggie replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "A rainy night, a slippery road. My husband had picked Timothy up from baseball practice." She paused, touching a simple gold chain around her neck. "Neither of them made it home." Jack reached across the table, hesitating for a moment before placing his hand over Maggie's. "I'm so sorry, Maggie. I had no idea." She gave him a grateful look. "It was 20 years ago, but some days it feels like yesterday. I threw myself into work after that, built Heartland from the ground up." But success. She glanced around the elegant cafe. "It doesn't fill the empty spaces in your heart." Emma got up from her chair and walked around to Maggie's side. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around the older woman's shoulders. Maggie stiffened for a moment, then melted into the embrace. "When Mommy died," Emma said, still hugging Maggie, "Daddy told me she became a Blows, star in heaven. Maybe Timothy and your husband are stars too, watching over you." Jack felt his throat tighten. He saw tears well up in Maggie's eyes as she held Emma close. "Your daddy is very wise," Maggie managed to say. "And you, sweet girl, have his beautiful heart." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Finally, Maggie wiped her eyes and straightened up, though she kept one arm around Emma. "You know what Timothy used to love? Ice cream sundaes," she signaled to the waiter. "Would anyone like to share that tradition with me?" Emma's face brightened. "Can we, Daddy?" Jack nodded, understanding now why Maggie had taken such an interest in them. He recognized in her the same ache he carried, the need to hold on to memories while somehow finding the strength to create new ones. As they shared enormous ice cream sundaes, Maggie told stories about Timothy, his love for baseball, his terrible jokes, the way he insisted on wearing mismatched socks for good luck. With each story, her voice grew stronger, as if sharing these memories was lifting a weight she'd carried alone for too long. "I stopped going to church after we lost them," Maggie admitted, pushing her empty sundae glass aside. "I was so angry at God, but lately," she looked at Emma, then Jack. "Lately I've been thinking about faith again, about how sometimes blessings come in unexpected ways." Jack understood. Since losing Sarah, his own faith had been tested, but it had also been his anchor, giving him strength to be both mother and father to Emma. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "God sends us exactly what we need, even if it's not what we thought we wanted." Emma had fallen asleep against Maggie's shoulder, ice cream smeared at the corner of her mouth. Jack checked his watch and realized they'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. "We should get going," he said, reaching for his crutches. "Emma has homework, and I'm sure you have meetings." Maggie nodded reluctantly. She gently woke Emma, who blinked sleepily and gathered her backpack. They made their way to the elevator, Jack moving carefully on his crutches while Maggie held Emma's hand. In the parking lot, Jack helped Emma into their old pickup truck. Through the rearview mirror, he could see Maggie standing by the building entrance, watching them. Even from this distance, he could see the tears in her eyes. But there was something else there too, a spark of hope, as if she'd found something she thought she'd lost forever. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Maggie's corner office as she watched Jack help an elderly janitor fix a wobbly cart. Even with his crutches, he'd insisted on getting down on his good knee to tighten the wheel. His kindness, so natural and unpretentious, touched something deep in her heart. Laura, her assistant, knocked softly on the doorframe. "Mrs. Delaney?" "The board members are waiting in the conference room." Maggie nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on Jack. "Tell me, Laura, how many applications do we get from people looking for a fresh start? Single parents, veterans, folks who've hit hard times?" "Dozens each month," Laura replied, checking her tablet. "We usually pass them to other companies since we're so selective with hiring." "Well, that changes today." Maggie turned a determined gleam in her eyes. "Schedule a meeting with HR. We're starting something new." 2 weeks later, the Heartland Lottery headquarters buzzed with excitement. Maggie stood at a podium in the main lobby, surrounded by employees and local press. Jack watched from the back, leaning on his crutches, with Emma beside him holding his hand. "Today, I'm proud to announce Heartland's Second Chance Initiative." Maggie's voice carried clearly through the space. "We believe everyone deserves an opportunity to rebuild their lives. Starting next month, we'll dedicate 20% of our new positions to veterans, single parents, and others who need a fresh start." The crowd erupted in applause. Emma tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Daddy, she's doing this because of you, isn't she?" Jack squeezed her hand, his throat tight with emotion. "No, sweetie. She's doing it because it's right." The initiative spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story, and other companies in the area began calling to learn more. Maggie handled each interview with grace, never mentioning Jack by name, but always crediting her personal experience with everyday heroes as her inspiration. In the weeks that followed, the office transformed. A veteran with a prosthetic leg joined the security team. A single mother became Laura's assistant. A recovering addict took charge of the mailroom. Each new face carried a story of struggle and hope, much like Jack's own. One evening, after most employees had gone home, Jack sat at his modest desk in the facility's office. Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, giving him rare quiet time alone. He pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. "Dear Maggie, I'm not good with fancy words, but I need to say this. When I ran into that burning building, I wasn't thinking about changing lives or starting something big. I just did what needed doing, that's all. But you saw something more. You took one simple act of kindness and turned it into hope for so many others. Every morning now, I see people coming to work with their heads held high, proud to have a second chance. Their kids, like my Emma, can dream bigger dreams. You could have just written a check and forgotten about me. Instead, you built something that will help families for years to come. That's real heroism, Maggie. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of faith." He folded the paper carefully and walked to Maggie's office. The security guard, Tom, one of the new hires, gave him a friendly nod as he passed. Jack placed the note on Maggie's desk, right next to her favorite coffee mug with its chip on the rim that she refused to replace. The next morning, Maggie arrived early as usual. The cleaning crew was just finishing up, and the first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and purples. She spotted the folded paper immediately. As she read Jack's words, her perfectly maintained composure cracked just a little. A single tear rolled down her cheek, followed by a warm smile that lit up her entire face. She carefully tucked the note into her desk drawer, right next to a photo of her son, the two most precious pieces of paper she owned. Through her office window, she watched Jack arrive for work, Emma skipping beside him despite his reminders to slow down. His limp was less pronounced now, his stride more confident. In helping him find his way back, she had somehow found her own path forward too. She pressed her intercom button. "Laura, could you come in? I have some ideas about expanding the Second Chance Initiative." The tears had dried, but the smile remained, bright as the morning sun streaming through her window. The Heartland Lottery headquarters' grand ballroom sparkled with elegant decorations. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the round tables draped in cream-colored linens. Fresh flowers filled silver vases, their sweet scent mixing with the aroma of gourmet dishes being served. Jack Holloway tugged at his borrowed tie, feeling out of place in the suit Maggie had insisted on having tailored for him. He sat at the main table, his crutches propped discreetly against the wall behind him. Emma, wearing a new blue dress, beamed at his side, her feet swinging beneath her chair as she sampled the fancy chocolate dessert. "You okay, Dad?" she whispered, noticing his fingers drumming nervously on the tablecloth. "Just a little scared, sweetheart," he admitted quietly, not used to talking in front of so many people. The ballroom was packed with over 200 guests, business leaders, community figures, and Heartland employees. Local news cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking steadily. Maggie rose from her seat, elegant in a deep purple dress, and approached the podium. The room fell silent. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice warm and strong. "Tonight marks a new chapter for Heartland Lottery. For years, we've been in the business of creating millionaires. But recent events have shown me that true wealth isn't always measured in dollars." Her eyes found Jack's, and she smiled. "2 months ago, a man I'd never met risked his life to save mine from a burning building. He didn't know who I was. He didn't stop to calculate the cost. He simply saw someone in need and acted." Jack felt his cheeks grow warm as heads turned toward him. Emma squeezed his hand under the table. "That man, Jack Holloway, didn't just save my life. He changed it. Through him, I've learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in everyday courage and simple kindness." Maggie went on to outline the Second Chance Initiative, a comprehensive program to hire veterans, single parents, and people rebuilding their lives. The company would provide training, flexible schedules, and support services. "And now," Maggie concluded, "I'd like to invite Jack to share his story." The spotlight swung to him as applause filled the room. Jack gripped his crutches and made his way carefully to the podium. His hands trembled as he unfolded the small paper where he'd written his notes. "I'm not much for public speaking," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "Usually, I let my work do the talking, but tonight, I want to tell you about faith." He paused, taking a deep breath. 5 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer. I found myself alone with a 5-year-old daughter and more questions than answers. Some days, just getting out of bed felt impossible. In the audience, several people nodded in understanding. Jack continued, growing more confident. "But every morning, my little girl would smile at me, and I'd remember what my mother always said. Faith isn't about knowing the path. It's about taking the next step anyway." He looked at Emma, who was watching him with proud eyes. "So I took that step, day after day. Sometimes it was forward, sometimes backward, but I kept moving. I learned that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up, one more time than you fall." The room was completely silent now, every face turned toward him. "The night of the fire, I didn't think about being brave. I just heard someone needed help, and I moved. That's all any of us can do. Take that next step, reach out that helping hand, trust that somehow it matters." His voice grew stronger. "Since coming to Heartland, I've seen that same spirit in so many of you. The security guard who brings coffee to the morning cleaning crew, the accountant who tutors her coworkers' kids, the maintenance man who feeds the stray cats behind the building." Scattered chuckles and nods rippled through the crowd. These small acts of kindness, they're like lottery tickets of the heart. You never know which one might change a life. I didn't expect saving someone from a fire would lead to standing here tonight. I didn't expect to find a new family in this company. Jack looked at Maggie, whose eyes shined with unshed tears. "But that's what faith is, isn't it? Believing that even in our darkest moments, grace can find us, that every ending might just be a beginning in disguise." He cleared his throat. "This Second Chance Initiative isn't just about jobs. It's about believing in people. It's about saying that everyone deserves another shot at their dreams. And sometimes, the biggest miracles start with the smallest acts of faith." The silence held for a moment after he finished. Then, slowly, people began to stand. The applause started softly and built to a thunderous roar. Emma jumped up, clapping and cheering. Even the cameramen were wiping their eyes. Jack made his way back to his seat, overwhelmed by the response. The standing ovation continued for several minutes, filling the ballroom with waves of genuine appreciation. As the applause finally faded and people returned to their seats, Maggie leaned close to him. Her voice was thick with emotion as she whispered, "You've given me back my purpose." Jack saw in her eyes the same light he'd seen in Emma's all those mornings, the light that had kept him going, one step at a time. It was the light of hope, of new beginnings, of faith rewarded. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke through Brooksville's quiet residential streets. Jack's limp was barely noticeable now as he walked slowly down the cracked sidewalk from his dented Honda to the front door of his small rental home. The familiar ache that had plagued him for months had finally begun to fade. His physical therapy sessions were paying off, and the constant throbbing pain in his leg had diminished to just an occasional twinge when the weather changed. The modest two-bedroom house stood tucked between similar homes on Maple Street, its white paint peeling slightly around the window frames. Jack had grown to appreciate its simple charm, the way morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, how the old wooden floors creaked with character beneath his feet. Inside, Emma sat at their small kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and papers, her golden blonde hair falling forward like a curtain as she concentrated intensely on her math homework. The tip of her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. She looked up with bright, sparkling eyes when Jack entered, dropping her pencil with a clatter. "Dad, I got an A+ on my science project." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Jack's tired face broke into a genuine smile as he crossed the linoleum floor and pulled her into a tight hug. The scent of her strawberry shampoo filled his senses, and he marveled at how she seemed to grow taller each day. The refrigerator was already covered with Emma's recent achievements: spelling bee certificates with gold stars, colorful art projects featuring stick figure families, and math quizzes marked with encouraging teacher comments. Now, this latest triumph would join the proud display. The kitchen timer chimed with its shrill beep, and Jack hurried to check the bubbling lasagna in their ancient oven. The cheese had turned perfectly golden brown, and steam rose from the edges where the sauce had caramelized. Maggie would be arriving soon for their weekly dinner, and he wanted everything to be just right. These meals had become a cherished routine over the past month, something he looked forward to all week. What started as occasional courtesy visits had grown into regular gatherings filled with genuine laughter and warm conversation that made their little house feel like a real home again. The doorbell's familiar chime echoed through the small rooms, and Emma bounded to answer it, her sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor. "Miss Maggie!" she exclaimed with pure delight. Maggie stood in the doorway, elegant as always, even in her casual weekend attire. Soft wool slacks and a cream-colored sweater that complemented her silver hair. She held a white paper bag from Rosie's Bakery, the local shop known for its homemade treats. "Hello, dear one," she said warmly, bending down to embrace Emma with the natural affection of someone who had been starved for such moments. "I brought dessert, those chocolate chip cookies you love so much." "You're spoiling us again," Jack called from the kitchen, though his tone carried warmth and affection rather than protest. He'd stopped fighting her small kindnesses weeks ago. "Nonsense," Maggie replied with a gentle laugh, setting the aromatic bag on the worn Formica counter. "I get to enjoy them too, don't I?" She moved naturally through their small kitchen now, reaching confidently for the mismatched plates in the cabinet where she'd learned they belonged. Her familiarity with their humble space spoke of countless similar evenings. "Something smells absolutely wonderful in here." "Dad made his famous lasagna," Emma announced proudly, practically bouncing on her toes. "And guess what? I got an A+ on my science project about the solar system." "Mrs. Henderson said it was one of the best she's ever seen. Did you now?" Maggie's weathered face lit up with genuine enthusiasm, the kind of joy that came from sharing in a child's pure excitement. "Well, that certainly calls for a proper celebration. Tell me all about it, every single detail." As they settled around their small dining table with its cheerful, checkered tablecloth, the conversation flowed as easily as water between them. Jack watched with quiet contentment as Emma launched into an animated explanation of her project, complete with elaborate hand gestures describing the planet's orbits and the vast distances between stars. Maggie listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that these moments were precious, asking thoughtful questions that made Emma beam with pride and launch into even more detailed explanations. These dinner gatherings had become precious islands of peace in their sometimes uncertain lives. Jack noticed subtle changes in Maggie during these evenings, how she'd stopped checking her ever-present phone during meals, how the perpetual tension in her shoulders seemed to melt away. The lines of worry that usually creased her forehead, evidence of the weight she carried as a business leader, softened in the warm glow of their modest dining room lamp. "The physical therapy must be working wonderfully," Maggie observed as Jack moved around the kitchen clearing plates, his movements fluid and confident. "You're barely favoring that leg anymore. Dr. Peterson says I'm ahead of schedule for recovery." Jack nodded, stacking the dishes with practiced efficiency. "Being able to move around at work instead of doing heavy construction labor probably helped more than I expected." "Speaking of work," Emma piped up eagerly, her eyes bright with excitement, "Dad helped me practice my presentation for Career Day next week. He's going to come talk to my class about safety and building things. I told everyone my dad's a real hero." "That's absolutely wonderful," Maggie smiled, her voice carrying a note of pride that surprised even her. Your father knows more about keeping people safe than anyone I've ever met." Her eyes met Jack's across the small room, and they shared a quiet moment of understanding that spoke of shared experiences and mutual respect. After dinner, Emma convinced them to venture out for ice cream at Murphy's, the old-fashioned parlor just 2 blocks away that had been serving the community for 3 generations. The evening was perfect for a leisurely stroll, crisp enough to require light jackets but not cold, with the first stars beginning to peek through the deepening purple sky like tiny diamonds scattered across velvet. As they walked along the tree-lined sidewalk, Emma skipped ahead with boundless energy, then circled back to them, chattering enthusiastically about her upcoming school play where she'd landed the role of the narrator. Jack found himself relaxed in a way he hadn't experienced in years, watching how naturally Maggie reached out to steady Emma when she stumbled over a crack in the uneven sidewalk, how his daughter leaned trustingly into that gentle, protective touch. At Murphy's, they claimed 3 red vinyl stools at the curved counter that squeaked musically when they turned. The shop's checkered floor and vintage milkshake machines transported them to a simpler time. Emma ordered her usual without hesitation, strawberry with rainbow sprinkles that she insisted made everything taste better. Jack chose classic vanilla, while Maggie surprised them both by selecting Rocky Road with its chunks of marshmallow and nuts. "I haven't had ice cream at a counter like this since I was Emma's age," Maggie admitted with a laugh, carefully wiping a spot of chocolate from her chin with a paper napkin. "Maybe even younger." "Really?" Emma's eyes widened with genuine astonishment. "But ice cream is literally the best thing ever invented. How could you stop eating it?" "Well, I suppose somewhere along the way, I just forgot how much pure fun it could be," Maggie said softly, her voice carrying a note of wistful recognition. "Sometimes we need very special people to remind us of life's simple pleasures, the ones that matter most." They savored their treats as the shop's warm lights began to dim around them, signaling the approaching closing time. The elderly proprietor smiled at them with the satisfaction of someone who'd witnessed countless such moments of simple happiness. Outside, the street lamps cast pools of golden light on the sidewalk, creating a pathway home through the gathering darkness. The walk back was quieter now, peaceful in the growing evening shadows. Emma positioned herself naturally between the 2 adults, and Jack watched with a heart full of bittersweet emotion as she reached out and slipped her small, trusting hand into Maggie's weathered one. The gesture was so natural, so innocent and pure, it made his chest ache with a sweet kind of pain he couldn't quite name. "I wish you were my grandma," Emma said simply, looking up at Maggie with the complete trust and love that only children could offer so freely. Maggie's steps faltered for just a moment, and Jack saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. She squeezed Emma's small hand gently between both of hers and whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Dark clouds rolled across the evening sky, bringing an early darkness to Brooksville. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by the low rumble of thunder that echoed through Heartland Lottery's nearly empty parking lot. Jack looked up from his maintenance clipboard as the first fat raindrops began to fall. His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "At Sarah's house for study group. Her mom says she'll drive me home before the storm gets bad. Thanks for letting me know, honey. Be safe." He typed back, smiling at his daughter's responsibility. The maintenance office's weather alert system beeped, warning of severe thunderstorms approaching. Jack knew the drill. During big storms, power outages were common in this part of town, and Heartland's backup generators needed monitoring. He grabbed his tool belt and security card, heading toward the basement level where the main generator was housed. The fluorescent lights flickered as another thunderclap shook the building. Most employees had gone home hours ago, leaving the halls eerily quiet except for the distant sound of rain pelting the windows. Jack's footsteps echoed as he made his way down the concrete stairs. In the generator room, he methodically checked the fuel levels and connections. The storm grew fiercer outside, wind howling through the building's ventilation system. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked in the warm, humming space. "Need a break," he muttered to himself, wiping his brow. The locker room was just down the hall. He could splash some cold water on his face and get back to work. The locker room was dimly lit, most of the overhead lights switched off for the night. Jack's footsteps squeaked on the clean tile floor as he approached the sink. He removed his security card from his belt and placed it on the counter, then turned on the tap and splashed cool water on his face. A door creaked somewhere in the room. Jack lifted his head, water dripping from his chin. "Hello," he called out. "Anybody there?" Only the muffled sound of thunder answered him. Must have been the wind, he thought, reaching for a paper towel. The building was full of old doors and windows that groaned during storms. After drying his face, Jack returned to the generator room. The backup system was running smoothly now, ready if the main power failed. He spent another hour checking and double-checking everything, making detailed notes in the maintenance log. By the time he finished, the storm had begun to ease. The thunder grew more distant, and the rain softened to a gentle patter. Jack gathered his tools, ready to head home to Emma. He reached for his security card and froze. It wasn't on his belt where he always kept it. Must have left it in the locker room, he said aloud, trying to calm the sudden spike of anxiety in his chest. The card was expensive to replace, and more importantly, it gave access to sensitive areas of the building. Jack hurried back to the locker room, his leg protesting slightly at the quick pace. The counter where he'd set the card was empty. He searched the floor, checked under the sinks, even looked in the trash bins. Nothing. Maybe it had fallen off earlier, he thought. He retraced his steps through the building, checking every spot he'd been. The card was nowhere to be found. Finally, exhausted and worried, Jack made his way to the security office. The night guard, Bill, looked up from his crossword puzzle as Jack explained the situation. "Don't worry too much," Bill said, logging the missing card in his report. "These things happen. I'll deactivate it right now, and you can get a replacement in the morning." Jack nodded, but the knot in his stomach wouldn't ease. He prided himself on being careful with company property, especially after everything Maggie had done for him. The drive home was slow through the wet streets. Puddles reflected the streetlights, and fallen branches littered the sidewalks. Emma was already home when he arrived, working on her homework at the kitchen table. "You're late, Dad," she said, looking up from her textbook. "Was it the storm?" "Yeah, had to check on some things at doing. Work." He didn't mention the lost card. No need to worry her. How was studying with Sarah? As Emma chatted about her evening, Jack tried to push away his nagging concerns. The card was deactivated now. Everything would be fine. What he couldn't know was that at that very moment, in Heartland's darkened hallways, a figure moved silently through the shadows. Security cameras captured only a glimpse, someone in dark clothing, face obscured, using a security card to access a restricted door. The card reader's small light blinked green, and the door opened with a soft click. The figure slipped inside the accounting server room, closing the door behind them. For several minutes, the camera showed nothing but an empty hallway. Then the door opened again, and the shadowy form disappeared into the night, leaving no trace of their presence except the digital footprint of Jack's security card. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean of clouds. Stars twinkled above Brooksville, oblivious to the events unfolding below. In his small home, Jack finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that his missing card had already been put to sinister use. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, puddles from last night's storm still dotting the Heartland Lottery parking lot. Jack pulled into his usual spot, his leg aching slightly from the dampness in the air. He grabbed his lunch bag, leftovers from the dinner Emma had proudly cooked, and headed toward the building's entrance. Something felt off the moment he stepped through the sliding glass doors. The usual friendly morning greetings were absent. Sarah, the receptionist who always had a warm smile for him, quickly looked away when he passed. Two accountants he often chatted with in the break room hurried past, their whispered conversation dying as soon as they saw him. Jack's stomach tightened. He'd lived through enough hard times to recognize when trouble was brewing. As he walked toward his office in the maintenance department, he noticed more employees giving him sideways glances or actively avoiding eye contact. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Chen, head of security. "Need to see you immediately." My office. Jack changed direction, his work boots squeaking against the polished floor as he made his way to the security wing. Through the glass walls, he could see several people gathered in Marcus's office. Serious faces, suits, laptops open. Marcus met him at the door. Usually friendly and laid back, today the security chief's face was grim. "Jack, come in. Close the door behind you." Inside, Jack recognized Thomas Barrett from Legal Affairs and Patricia Wong from IT Security. Neither would meet his eyes. "Sit down, please," Marcus said, gesturing to an empty chair. He remained standing, arms crossed. "Jack, there was a security breach last night. Someone accessed our secure servers and tampered with data related to our upcoming lottery draw." Jack's brow furrowed. "That's terrible. How can I help?" "The access occurred at 11:43 p.m., Patricia said, turning her laptop screen toward him. "Using your security card. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. What? That's impossible. I was home with Emma by then. The security footage shows someone using your card to enter the server room, Marcus continued. They were wearing a maintenance uniform and kept their face hidden from the cameras. I secured the backup generator during the storm, but I left right after, around 9. Jack's mind raced. My card? It was in my locker while I was working on the generator. Thomas Barrett cleared his throat. Convenient explanation. It's the truth, Jack said, his voice rising slightly. Check the cameras. You'll see me leave the building at 9. We did, Marcus said. You left at 9:17 p.m., but your card was used again at 11:43 p.m. Then someone took it from my locker. Jack stood up, wincing as his bad leg protested. I would never, after everything. Maggie's done for me and Emma. Miss Delaney? Thomas corrected coldly. And the timing is interesting, isn't it? You've had access to our facilities for months now. Plenty of time to learn our systems, our schedules. Jack's face grew hot. You think I planned this? That I saved Maggie's life as part of some scheme? Please sit down, Mr. Holloway, Patricia said quietly. We're just trying to understand what happened. What happened is someone stole my card and framed me. Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. I'm not a thief. I'm not a fraud. Everything I have, I earned through honest work. The evidence suggests otherwise, Thomas said. Your card, your access codes, your uniform. Evidence can lie, Jack shot back. People who know the truth, they don't. The office door opened. Jack turned, hoping to see a friendly face, someone who would believe him. Instead, his heart sank. Maggie stood in the doorway, her elegant frame rigid with tension. Her eyes, usually so warm when they looked at him, now held confusion and pain. She'd clearly been crying. Jack? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me it isn't true. Maggie, please. You know me. You know Emma. I would never betray your trust like this. She closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. When she opened them, they were distant, professional. Mr. Chen, please continue with the investigation protocols. Marcus nodded, pulling out a document. Mr. Holloway, you're suspended pending investigation. Please surrender your security card and any company property in your possession. Jack's hand shook as he pulled the card from his pocket. The same card that had given him access to a new life, a fresh start, now felt like it was burning his fingers. Security will escort you out, Marcus continued. Please don't attempt to enter the premises or contact any Heartland employees until the investigation is complete. 2 guards appeared in the doorway. Jack looked at Maggie, one, last time, silently pleading, but she had turned away, her shoulders stiff with hurt. As the guards led him toward the elevator, employees quickly stepped aside, averting their eyes. Just weeks ago, they'd applauded him at the charity dinner. Now they treated him like a criminal. In the lobby, Sarah, the receptionist, watched him pass, tears in her eyes. Jack walked out into the gray morning, his leg aching, his heart heavier than it had been since losing his wife. Behind him, the automatic doors whispered shut, cutting him off from everything he'd rebuilt, everything he'd hoped for. The rain started falling again, mixing with the tears he couldn't hold back anymore. Jack sat at a small kitchen table, the termination letter trembling in his weathered hands. The morning light filtering through the window seemed harsh and unforgiving, highlighting every crease in the official document. Next to it lay the local newspaper, its bold headline punching him in the gut. Hero Dad under investigation. The words blurred as he read them for the 100th time. His security badge, his lifeline to a better future, had supposedly been used to access sensitive lottery data, but he knew in his heart he'd never betray Maggie's trust like that. Emma's schoolbooks lay scattered across the other end of the table, homework forgotten as she watched him with worried eyes. She'd barely touched her breakfast cereal, now soggy in the bowl. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the heavy silence. Daddy? Emma's small voice broke through his thoughts. I know you didn't do it. Jack looked up at his daughter, her face so earnest and trusting it made his chest ache. She wore her favorite purple sweater, the one Maggie had given her last month. The memory of that happy day twisted like a knife in his heart. I know, sweetie. He managed, trying to keep his voice steady, but sometimes knowing isn't enough. Emma slid off her chair and came around the table, wrapping her arms around his neck. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and innocence. Miss Maggie knows too. She has to. But Jack remembered the look in Maggie's eyes yesterday, confusion, hurt, and something worse, doubt. After everything they'd been through, after all the trust they'd built, it had crumbled like ashes in his hands. The phone rang again, probably another reporter. They'd been calling all morning, hungry for details about the hero gone wrong story. Jack let it go to voicemail, like all the others. He pushed himself up from the table, his injured leg protesting. The physical therapy had been helping, but stress made everything worse. Moving to the living room window, he watched as Mrs. Henderson from next door hurried past, averting her eyes when she saw him. Word traveled fast in their small community. "Maybe we should make cookies," Emma suggested, following him. "Remember when Mom said cookies make everything better?" Jack's throat tightened. Sarah had always known what to say, how to find light in the darkest moments. He missed her wisdom now more than ever. "Not today, sweetheart," he said softly. "Why don't you go finish your homework?" Emma lingered for a moment, then nodded, gathering her books. She was trying so hard to be brave, to be strong for him. It only made the shame burn deeper. The afternoon dragged on, heavy with unspoken fears. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from his old construction boss. Saw the news. Tough break, man. Even people who knew him, who'd worked beside him for years, seemed to be questioning everything now. He tried to keep busy, cleaning the already spotless apartment, organizing tools he might never use again at work. Each time he passed the mirror, he barely recognized the tired, defeated man staring back at him. Around 4 o'clock, a knock at the door made them both jump. Jack's heart raced. Was it Maggie? But when he opened it, there was only a thick envelope on the welcome mat. The eviction notice he'd been dreading. Final warning, 7 days to vacate. The words swam before his eyes as thunder rumbled in the distance. Emma appeared beside him, picking up the envelope he'd dropped. Her small fingers traced the red final notice stamp. "We're going to have to move, aren't we?" she asked quietly. Jack couldn't answer. The walls of their small apartment seemed to close in around him. This place held all their memories of Sarah. The height marks on the kitchen doorframe, the tiny handprint Emma had made in craft clay hanging by the window, the family photos lining the hallway. Rain began to fall outside, pattering against the windows like nature's own tears. Emma hugged the envelope to her chest, looking so much like her mother it hurt. "Remember what you always tell me?" she said. "God has a plan, even when we can't see it." Jack's legs felt weak. He made his way to the living room and sank to his knees beside the old armchair, Sarah's favorite spot. The same chair where he'd held Emma through countless storms, where they'd read bedtime stories, where they'd cried together after the funeral. "Lord," he whispered, his voice breaking, "if there's still a plan for me, please show it." Emma knelt beside him, her small hand finding his. The rain fell harder outside, but in that moment of prayer, Jack felt his daughter's unwavering faith wrap around him like a warm blanket. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They stayed like that, father and daughter, as the storm raged on, their world changing, but their bond unbreakable. Maggie Delaney sat alone in her expansive office, the city lights twinkling beyond her window like distant stars. The boardroom's harsh words still echoed in her mind. "Cut him loose," they'd said. "Distance yourself from the scandal." She picked up the framed photo from her desk, the one taken at the charity banquet. Jack stood tall despite his crutches, Emma beaming beside him, while Maggie herself smiled with genuine joy. The glass was smudged where her fingers had traced their faces countless times over the past few days. "I know him," she whispered to the empty room. "I know his heart." Her intercom buzzed. "Miss Delaney? Mr. Richardson from the board is on line 1. Tell him I'm in a meeting." Maggie's voice was firm as she pressed the button. She reached for her personal phone instead, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she needed. "James Conrad Investigations," a gruff voice answered. "James, it's Maggie Delaney. I need your best work on this one." She straightened in her chair, her resolve strengthening, and complete discretion. "For you, Maggie? Always. What's the case?" Maggie explained the situation, the security breach, the lottery data tampering, Jack's suspension. Her voice caught when she described Emma's tearful phone call yesterday, asking why everyone thought her daddy was bad. "I don't care what the board says," Maggie continued. "Something isn't right. Jack Holloway saved my life. He's a man who'd run into a burning building for a stranger. He wouldn't throw away his daughter's future for money." "Send me everything you have," James replied. "Security logs, access records, personnel files. I'll start tonight." After hanging up, Maggie pulled up the security footage again. She'd watched it so many times, the timestamps were burned into her memory. 2:37 a.m., Jack securing the generator during the storm. 3:12 a.m., Jack leaving the building, limping slightly in the rain. 4:45 a.m., the masked figure using his card. Her eyes burned from staring at the screens. Every conversation with Jack played through her mind. His reluctance to accept help, his quiet pride in honest work, his unwavering faith even when times were tough. The way he taught Emma to always tell the truth, no matter what. The next morning, Maggie arrived early, before most of her employees. She walked the path Jack would have taken that night, from the generator room to the locker room, then to the exit. Something wasn't adding up. Her phone vibrated. "Miss Delaney?" It was James. "I need access to your employee database, specifically past employees from the last 5 years. I'll have to go through HR," she said. "Give me an hour." While waiting for the files, Maggie visited the security office. The night guard, Tom, was ending his shift. "That night of the storm," she asked, "did you see Jack leave?" Tom nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He was soaked through, but insisted on checking every generator connection twice. Real thorough, that one. "Did anyone else come in or out?" Tom hesitated. "Well, Miss Jensen's ex-husband dropped off some paperwork for her, said she'd forgotten to sign some insurance forms." Maggie's breath caught. Laura's ex-husband, the former company accountant who'd left under suspicious circumstances last year. She'd forgotten about him. Her phone rang again. James's voice was urgent. "Maggie, I need to show you something. Can you access the parking garage cameras from the night of the storm? Look at 4:15 a.m. Maggie pulled up the footage on her computer. Through the rain-streaked lens, a familiar figure hurried toward the building's side entrance. Even with a hood pulled low, she recognized the walk, the build. "Now cross-reference that with your employee records," James instructed. Maggie's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up personnel files. There it was, Robert Jensen, former head accountant, terminated for suspected embezzlement but never charged due to lack of evidence. "There's more," James said. "The masked figure on your security footage? They're favoring their left leg. Check the HR records. Jensen broke his left ankle 2 months ago. It wouldn't have fully healed yet." Maggie's heart pounded as she fast-forwarded through more footage. The masked figure moved with the same slight limp as they used Jack's stolen card to access the system. "Got him," James said grimly. "Your lottery hero's being framed, Maggie. And I bet if we dig deeper into those old embezzlement allegations." "Send me everything," Maggie ordered, already reaching for her office phone. "Every frame of footage, every scrap of evidence. I need it all for the emergency board meeting I'm calling in 1 hour." She sat back in her chair, relief washing over her like a warm wave. She'd known, in her heart, she'd known Jack was innocent. Now she just had to prove it to everyone else. Looking at the photo on her desk one more time, Maggie smiled. "Hold on, Jack," she whispered. "Help is coming." Her intercom buzzed again. "Miss Delaney, the investigator just sent over the security footage files. They're ready for viewing." Maggie squared her shoulders and stood. It was time to clear Jack's name and bring the real culprit to justice. Emma would have her father's good name back, and the truth would finally come to light. Maggie's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she strode toward Laura's desk. The office was nearly empty, most employees having left hours ago. Laura sat hunched over her computer, her usually neat appearance disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. "We need to talk," Maggie said quietly. Laura's head snapped up, fear flashing across her face. "Miss Delaney, I was just finishing some reports." "In the security office's database?" Maggie placed a folder on Laura's desk. Inside were screenshots from the surveillance cameras, showing a familiar figure using Jack's access card. "The man in these images, he's your ex-husband, isn't he?" Laura's hands began to shake. She pushed back from her desk, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't, Laura." Maggie pulled up a chair and sat down, her voice gentle but firm. "I've known something was wrong for weeks. You've been distracted, nervous. The Laura I know would never make the filing mistakes I've seen lately." She leaned forward. "Talk to me. What did David do?" At the mention of her ex-husband's name, Laura's composure crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He found me a month ago. Said he needed money. Big money. He knew about the lottery systems from when he worked here." She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "He threatened to tell everyone about things from our marriage. things that would ruin me. So he forced you to help him access the system? Maggie asked softly. Laura nodded, her shoulders shaking. He made me tell him about the security protocols, the server schedules. But I swear, Miss Delaney, I never meant for Jack to take the blame. David was the one who stole his card that night. I didn't know he was going to do that. Maggie reached out and took Laura's cold hands in hers. Why didn't you come to me? You know I would have protected you. I was scared, Laura whispered. David, he has a way of making you feel trapped, like there's no way out. And then when everything happened with Jack, fresh tears fell. He's such a good man. His daughter. Oh God, what have I done? It's not too late to fix this, Maggie said firmly. She pulled out her phone and pressed a button. Did you get all that, Detective Morris? A man in a plain suit stepped out from around the corner, digital recorder in hand. Every word, Miss Delaney. We'll need Miss Jensen to make a formal statement, but this is enough to start building a case against David Cooper. Laura's eyes widened in panic. But he won't touch you, Maggie interrupted. You'll have protection, and you'll have me. She squeezed Laura's hands. But first, we need to make this right. Are you willing to tell the truth? All of it? Laura straightened her shoulders, something of her old strength returning to her face. Yes, I'll do whatever it takes to help Jack. He saved your life, and this is how we repaid him. She looked at Maggie pleadingly. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Jack Holloway has more grace in his heart than most people I've ever known, Maggie said, standing. But right now, we need to focus on clearing his name. She turned to Detective Morris. How quickly can we move on this? We can pick up David Cooper tonight. With Miss Jensen's testimony and the security footage, we've got enough for an arrest. Maggie nodded sharply. Good. Laura, go with Detective Morris. Tell them everything. She squeezed the younger woman's shoulder. You're doing the right thing. After they left, Maggie walked to her office, determination in every step. She called her PR team and her legal department, ordering them to clear their schedules for an emergency meeting. At her desk, she began typing, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she crafted a press statement. The words flowed easily, not the careful corporate language she usually used, but something more personal. She wrote about trust and redemption, about a man who had risked his life to save a stranger and asked nothing in return. She wrote about mistakes and forgiveness, and the responsibility of power to protect the innocent. Her assistant knocked softly, entering with a stack of papers. The legal team sent these up. They're concerned about potential liability if we go public before the investigation is complete. Maggie set them aside without looking. Some things matter more than liability. She looked out her window at the city below, thinking of Jack and Emma in their small apartment, bearing the weight of false accusations. Get me a press conference set up for tomorrow morning, full media coverage. But Miss Delaney, the board, will have to deal with it, Maggie said firmly. I built this company from nothing. I've spent years playing it safe, following the rules. But sometimes, she touched the scar on her arm from the fire, remembering Jack's unconscious form being loaded into the ambulance. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking a risk. She turned back to her computer, adding the final touches to her statement. Tomorrow, she would stand before the cameras and tell the world the truth. She would clear Jack's name, no matter the cost to herself or the company, because some debts couldn't be measured in dollars and some people were worth fighting for. Laura's quiet voice from the doorway interrupted her thoughts. Miss Delaney? I've finished with the detective. They're picking up David now. She hesitated. What happens next? Maggie saved her document and stood. Next, we make things right. Go home and rest, Laura. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. After Laura left, Maggie sat in the growing darkness of her office, reading over her statement one last time. The words seemed to glow on the screen. Today, I stand before you, not as the CEO of Heartland Lottery, but as someone who owes her life to Jack Holloway. She hit save and gathered her things. It was time to show the world what real winning looked like. Thick snowflakes drifted down from a steel gray sky, coating Brooksville in a blanket of pristine white. Maggie's luxury car crawled carefully along the slick streets, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Her heart pounded as she approached Jack's modest rental house, its peeling paint and crooked mailbox, a stark contrast to her usual surroundings. She parked and sat for a moment, watching the snow pile up on her windshield. The manila envelope on the passenger seat contained everything: the security footage, Laura's signed confession, the proof of Jack's innocence. But would it be enough to heal the hurt in his eyes? Taking a deep breath, Maggie grabbed the envelope and made her way up the icy walkway. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Emma stood there in her pajamas and fuzzy socks, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "Miss Maggie!" Emma exclaimed, launching herself forward for a hug. "I knew you'd come back. I told Daddy you would." Maggie held the girl tight, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo. "Of course, I came back, sweetheart. Is your father home?" "He's in the living room." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's been really sad. He doesn't smile anymore, not even when I tell my best jokes." Heavy footsteps approached, and Jack appeared in the doorway. He looked thinner, his face drawn with exhaustion. The spark of warmth that had always been in his eyes, even in the hardest times, had dimmed to barely an ember. "Emma, go finish your homework," he said quietly. "But Daddy, please, honey." Emma's shoulders slumped as she trudged away, casting worried glances over her shoulder. Jack stood silently, neither inviting Maggie in nor asking her to leave. The snow collected on her coat as they regarded each other across the threshold. "May I come in?" Maggie finally asked. "I have something important to show you." He stepped aside wordlessly, his movements stiff and guarded. The living room was sparse but neat, a worn couch, a small TV, and Emma's artwork brightening the walls. A Bible lay open on the coffee table, its pages marked with sticky notes. "I know who framed you," Maggie said without preamble, pulling documents from the envelope. "And I have proof." Jack's expression didn't change as she laid out the evidence. The security footage showing Laura's ex-husband, bank records of suspicious transfers, Laura's tearful confession. He studied each piece methodically, his hands trembling slightly. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice rough. "Why would they do this?" "Money, desperation, the usual reasons people make terrible choices." Maggie sat beside him on the couch, close enough to show support, but far enough to give him space. Laura's ex-husband threatened to take their kids if she didn't help him access the lottery data. He knew about your schedule, knew you'd be working late that night. He stole your card and made sure the cameras caught a glimpse, just enough to cast suspicion. Jack ran a hand over his face. "All this time, I thought. I wondered if you believed that you'd betrayed my life." "Trust?" Maggie shook her head firmly. "Never. Not for a second. I knew in my heart you were innocent. That's why I hired the investigator, why I wouldn't stop until we found the truth." "But you stayed away," he said quietly, and the hurt in his voice cut deep. The board insisted. They were worried about legal implications, about the company's reputation. Maggie's voice cracked. "I should have fought harder. I should have stood by you publicly from the start. I'm so sorry, Jack." Emma peeked around the corner, her homework forgotten. "Does this mean Daddy's name is clear? Can we have family dinners again?" Jack looked at his daughter, then back at Maggie. The walls he'd built started to crumble. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes when trust is broken." "But it wasn't broken," Emma protested, fully entering the room now. "Miss Maggie believed in you the whole time. She just had to prove it to everyone else." "Your daughter is wise beyond her years," Maggie said softly. "The press conference is tomorrow morning. I'm going to announce everything. The truth about what happened, your complete exoneration, and your immediate reinstatement if you want it." She paused, gathering courage. "But more than that, I want to apologize publicly for not standing beside you when you needed it most." Jack stared out the window at the falling snow, his expression unreadable. "These past weeks, I've felt so lost. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in. That's why I'm here now." Maggie reached out, covering his hand with hers. She looked him directly in the eye and spoke from her heart. "You didn't lose your faith, Jack. You just misplaced it. Let me help you find it again." Bright camera flashes lit up the Heartland Lottery headquarters lobby like lightning strikes against the snowy morning outside. Reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, their winter coats dripping melted snow onto the polished marble floor. At the podium, Maggie stood tall in her elegant navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the weather. To her right, Jack shifted uncomfortably in his new blazer, a gift from Maggie he'd finally accepted. His calloused hands gripped Emma's shoulders gently as she stood in front of him in her Sunday best, her small face serious but hopeful. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maggie began, her voice clear and strong through the microphone. 2 weeks ago, a good man's reputation was damaged by false accusations. Today, we're here to set the record straight. She gestured to her assistant, who distributed packets of evidence to the front row of journalists. The security breach at Heartland Lottery was perpetrated by James Wilson, a former employee who used stolen credentials to access our systems. Mr. Wilson has been arrested and has confessed to his crimes. The reporters burst into activity, scribbling frantically in their notepads. Maggie raised her hand for silence. Jack Holloway, she continued, turning to meet his eyes with a warm smile, is not only innocent of any wrongdoing, but he remains the hero who saved my life in that fire. His character has never been in question to those who truly know him. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Jack blinked against the flashes. Emma reached up to squeeze his hand, and he drew strength from her touch. "Mr. Holloway," called out a reporter from the front row, "how does it feel to be cleared of all suspicion?" Jack leaned toward the microphone, his voice rough with emotion. "Grateful. Grateful to Miss Delaney for believing in me. Grateful to the investigators who uncovered the truth. And grateful to God for seeing us through this trial." "Miss Delaney," another reporter shouted, "will Mr. Holloway be returning to his position at Heartland?" Maggie's eyes twinkled. "Actually, we have a better announcement to make." She pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket. "Jack, Emma, would you join me?" They stepped forward, and Maggie handed Jack the envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "What we have here," Maggie explained to the crowd, "is the deed to a small commercial property on Main Street, plus startup capital for a new business venture." She beamed at Jack's stunned expression. "Mr. Holloway will be opening his own construction and repair company, specializing in employing veterans and single parents, continuing the mission of our Second Chance initiative in his own way." Emma bounced on her toes, unable to contain her excitement. "Daddy's gonna be a boss." A ripple of gentle laughter spread through the crowd. Jack's eyes glistened as he stared at the papers in his hands. "I don't know what to say," he managed, his voice thick. "Say you'll accept," Maggie said softly, though the microphone caught her words. "Consider it back pay for all the improvements you've made to our facilities and our hearts." More questions flew from the reporters. "When will the business open? How many people will you employ? Miss Delaney, what inspired this gesture?" Maggie fielded them professionally, but kept glancing at Jack and Emma, her expression tender. Finally, she raised her hands for quiet one last time. "I'd like to close with something personal," she said. "When Jack saved my life in that fire, he didn't know who I was. He didn't calculate the potential benefit to himself. He simply saw someone in need and acted with courage and compassion." She paused, collecting herself. "That's the measure of this man's character, and that's the kind of person we need more of in this world." Applause broke out, spreading through the lobby like a wave. Emma hugged her father's waist as he stood straight and tall, dignity restored. Cameras flashed again, capturing the moment. The successful businesswoman, the vindicated hero, and the little girl who had never lost faith in either of them. As the formal press conference wound down and reporters began gathering their equipment, Jack knelt down to Emma's level. Their eyes met, brown to brown, sharing the same quiet strength that had carried them through so many hard times. "See, baby girl?" he whispered, pulling her into a tight embrace. "God never forgets his promises." A week after the press conference, soft evening light filtered through the curtains of Jack's small rental home. The scent of Emma's favorite spaghetti and meatballs wafted from the kitchen where she was setting the table, humming quietly to herself. Jack sat in his worn armchair, reading through job applications he'd printed out earlier that day. A gentle knock at the door made him look up. Emma rushed to answer it, her sock-covered feet sliding on the wooden floor. "Miss Maggie," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around the older woman's waist. Maggie laughed warmly, returning the embrace. She wore a casual sweater and slacks today, looking more relaxed than Jack had ever seen her at the office. "Something smells wonderful in here," she said, following Emma inside. Jack started to stand, but Maggie waved him back down. "Please, stay comfortable. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to drop something off." She pulled an envelope from her purse, holding it carefully as if it contained something precious. "Maggie, you've already done more than enough," Jack protested, but she shook her head. "This isn't charity, Jack. This is something I did weeks ago, before any of the trouble started. I've been waiting for the right moment." She handed him the sealed envelope, its paper thick and cream-colored. Emma peered over her father's shoulder as he carefully opened it. Inside was a single lottery ticket, dated 3 weeks prior. Next to it was a printout of winning numbers. "I don't understand," Jack said, looking between the ticket and the numbers. Maggie sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes twinkling. "Check the numbers, Jack. Really check 'em." With trembling fingers, Jack compared each number. His eyes widened as he realized they matched perfectly. The room seemed to spin slightly as he saw the prize amount listed at the bottom of the page. "This is—" He swallowed hard, unable to finish the sentence. "A second-tier winner?" Maggie completed for him. "Not the grand prize. I didn't want to be too obvious. But enough to buy a modest house outright and start that small construction business you've been dreaming about." Emma bounced on her toes, trying to see. "What is it, Daddy? What did we win?" Jack's voice was barely a whisper as he showed her the amount. $250,000, baby girl. Emma's jaw dropped. "That's like $1 bazillion." "Not quite," Maggie chuckled, "but enough to make some dreams come true." She turned serious for a moment. "I entered this ticket in your name weeks ago, Jack. It was my way of saying thank you, not just for saving my life, but for showing me what real courage and integrity look like. The winning numbers were drawn before any of the trouble started, so there can be no question about its legitimacy." Jack stared at the numbers in disbelief, his voice thick with emotion. "Maggie, this could change everything." She smiled gently, placing her hand over his. It already did. The spring breeze carried the fresh scent of paint across the parking lot of the small commercial building on Oak Street. Emma Holloway, wearing overalls splattered with blue and white paint, carefully traced the letters on the wooden sign while balancing on a stepladder. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration as she added the finishing touches to the ampersand between repairs and restoration. "Looking good up there, sweetheart," Jack called from below, steadying the ladder. His leg had healed well, though he still walked with a slight limp on rainy days. The morning sun caught the gray at his temples, earned from years of hard work and worry, but his eyes sparkled with renewed purpose. "Almost done, Dad," Emma announced, adding one final stroke to the sign. "What do you think?" The hand-painted sign read Holloway Repairs and Restoration in neat blue letters, with Building Second Chances written in smaller text beneath. Jack's throat tightened with emotion as he looked at their family name displayed so proudly. Across the lot, two men in work clothes were unloading tools from a truck. Tom Stevens, a former Marine with a quiet demeanor, carefully arranged power tools on newly installed shelves. Besides him, Sarah Martinez, a single mom who'd done maintenance work for years, organized the front office space. They were Jack's first two hires, people who, like him, just needed someone to believe in them. "The newspaper people are here," Emma called out, climbing down the ladder. A small crowd had begun to gather for the opening ceremony. Local reporters set up cameras while curious neighbors stood around, examining the freshly painted storefront. Maggie's silver Mercedes pulled into the parking lot, and she stepped out wearing a smart business suit, her silver hair catching the morning light. She carried a large red ribbon and ceremonial scissors, but what drew Jack's attention was her warm, grandmother-like smile as Emma ran to hug her. "Miss Maggie Grandma," Emma wrapped her arms around Maggie's waist. "Do you like our sign? I painted it myself." "It's absolutely perfect, sweetheart," Maggie said, smoothing Emma's hair. She looked up at Jack, her eyes misty. "Just perfect." The crowd grew as more people arrived. Jack recognized faces from the neighborhood, the bakery owner from down the street, families he'd helped during his construction days, and even a few of his former co-workers. Tom and Sarah joined them outside, standing proudly in their new navy blue work shirts with the company logo. "Should we begin?" Maggie asked, holding up the ribbon and scissors. Jack nodded, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the moment. He cleared his throat and faced the small gathering. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. 3 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But sometimes God's greatest gifts come disguised as our biggest challenges." He glanced at Maggie, who nodded encouragingly. "This shop isn't just about repairs and restoration, it's about second chances. Every person deserves one, and sometimes they just need someone to believe in them first." Emma slipped her hand into his as he continued. "The lottery ticket that made this possible wasn't just about money. It was about faith. Faith in people, in community, and in the power of giving back." He squeezed his daughter's hand. "So today, we're not just opening a business. We're opening doors for others who need their own second chance." Maggie stepped forward with the ribbon, and together with Emma, they stretched it across the shop's entrance. The morning sun caught the fresh paint on the sign, making it gleam like a beacon of hope. "Would you do the honors?" Maggie offered the scissors to Emma. Emma's face lit up as she took them. Together? She asked, looking between her father and Maggie. They each placed a hand on the scissors, and with a clean snip, the ribbon fell. Applause erupted from the crowd as photographers captured the moment. 3 generations linked by circumstance and love, standing before a dream made real. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and tours of the shop. Jack showed visitors the training area where he planned to teach basic repair skills to community members. Sarah proudly demonstrated their new scheduling system, while Tom explained their veteran outreach program. By late afternoon, the crowd had thinned, but the shop hummed with activity. 2 new jobs had already been booked, and Tom was preparing estimates for 3 more. Sarah's phone rang steadily with inquiries, and Emma had appointed herself official greeter, welcoming everyone with her infectious smile. Jack stood in the doorway of his office, a simple room with a desk, family photos, and a framed article about his rescue of Maggie. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the fresh paint and new wood. The walls seemed to glow with possibility. He watched as Emma showed Maggie their break room, where a coffee maker bubbled cheerfully and homemade cookies sat on a plate. Sarah's contribution to opening day. Their voices mixed with the sound of tools being organized and phones ringing, creating a symphony of purpose and promise. Tom approached with a clipboard. Got our first emergency call, boss. Broken water heater over on Maple Street. Jack smiled at the word boss. It still felt strange, but right. Let's show them what we can do, he said, reaching for his tool belt. The sun was setting as they prepared to close for the day. Long shadows stretched across the parking lot, and the shop's new sign caught the golden light. Emma was helping Sarah file the day's paperwork while Maggie sat in a comfortable chair they'd put in the corner, making notes about potential collaborations with Heartland's community programs. Jack stood in the center of the main work area, taking it all in. The neat rows of tools, the fresh paint, the sound of his daughter's laughter mixing with the quiet conversation of his new employees, it felt right. It felt like, we're finally home, he said softly, a smile spreading across his face. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across Jefferson Park, filtering through the budding branches of towering elm trees and casting dancing shadows on the freshly mowed grass. 3 weathered picnic tables had been pushed together under a sprawling oak tree whose new leaves whispered secrets in the gentle spring breeze. Jack Holloway stood back for a moment, taking in the simple beauty of the scene, the kind of peaceful moment he'd learned to treasure after all they'd been through. His daughter Emma moved around the makeshift dining area with the focused determination of a 10-year-old on an important mission. She arranged paper plates and plastic utensils with careful precision, her small tongue poking out slightly in concentration, a habit she'd had since she was tiny, one that never failed to make his heart squeeze with love. Her honey-colored hair, so much like her mother's, caught the afternoon light as she bent over her work. A little to the left, sweetheart, Maggie Delaney suggested warmly, her voice carrying the kind of gentle authority that came from years of running board meetings, but softened by genuine affection. She held up a red and white checkered tablecloth that fluttered and snapped in the gentle spring breeze like a flag of celebration. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, and her eyes, those sharp blue eyes that had once intimidated corporate rivals, now crinkled with pure joy as she watched Emma immediately adjust the place settings without question. Like this, Miss Maggie? Emma asked, stepping back to survey her handiwork with the same critical eye Jack used when examining his construction projects. Her face beamed with pride at the neat rows of plates and carefully folded napkins. Perfect. Maggie nodded, smoothing down her corner of the tablecloth with hands that had signed million-dollar contracts, but now seemed most content arranging a simple picnic. Just perfect, darling. Jack smiled as he pulled containers from the large wicker basket he'd brought, the same basket his late wife Sarah had used for family outings years ago. Inside were his famous chicken salad, a recipe that had earned him compliments from coworkers for years, fresh rolls still warm from the bakery down the street from his new shop, and the strawberry shortcake Emma had insisted on making herself that morning. She'd gotten up at dawn, determined to create something special for their weekly picnic with Maggie. The sweet scent of berries mingled with the fresh-cut grass and the delicate fragrance of blooming dogwood trees that dotted the park. Need any help there, Jack? Maggie asked, but he shook his head with a smile, enjoying the familiar rhythm of setting up their outdoor feast. I've got it under control. Though I think Emma might need help with those drinks she's juggling like a circus performer. Emma giggled as she carefully balanced 3 mason jars filled with homemade lemonade, ice cubes clinking musically against the glass like tiny wind chimes. "I didn't spill a single drop," she announced proudly, setting each jar down with the concentration of a surgeon performing delicate work. The three of them settled around the picnic table, the early evening light casting long, peaceful shadows across their feast. Jack couldn't help but notice how the setting sun made everything look golden and perfect, like a photograph from a magazine about the American dream. He also noticed how Maggie's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her napkin, the way they did when she was nervous about something important. Though her smile remained bright and genuine, he'd learned to read the subtle signs of her emotions over these past months of friendship. "This chicken salad is absolutely incredible," Maggie praised after taking her first bite, closing her eyes briefly to savor the flavors. "You really will have to share your secret recipe someday, Jack. I've been trying to recreate it all week and I can't even come close." He chuckled, watching Emma pile extra strawberries onto her shortcake with the single-minded focus of someone who believed more was always better when it came to dessert. "Family secret, I'm afraid. Passed down from my grandmother to my mother, then to me. She made me swear on her Bible never to write it down. Then I suppose I'll just have to keep coming to these picnics for the rest of my life," Maggie replied with a theatrical wink that made Emma burst into delighted giggles. They ate and chatted as the shadows grew longer and the air filled with the sounds of spring. Birds calling from the treetops, children laughing in the distance, the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Jack shared stories about the new veteran he'd hired at Holloway Repairs and Restoration, a quiet man named Carlos who had steady hands and a gentle way with difficult repair jobs. Emma excitedly described her science project about butterfly migrations, complete with hand gestures that nearly knocked over her lemonade twice. The conversation flowed as easily as water, punctuated by comfortable laughter and peaceful silences, filled only by the symphony of a park coming alive with evening activity. As they finished their dessert and Emma carefully wiped strawberry juice from her chin, Maggie cleared her throat softly. The sound carried a weight that made both Jack and Emma look up with sudden attention. "Emma? Sweetheart?" Maggie's voice held a special tenderness, the tone she used when she was about to say something important. "I have something for you." Emma's eyes widened with curiosity, bright and expectant as she set down her fork. Jack felt his chest tighten with a mixture of anticipation and concern. Maggie had mentioned wanting to do something special for Emma's upcoming birthday, but he hadn't known what she'd planned. He'd learned that Maggie's generosity knew few bounds, and while he was grateful, his pride sometimes struggled with accepting too much help. Maggie reached into her leather handbag, the same elegant bag she carried to board meetings and charity galas, and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with Emma's name written across the front in elegant script that looked like calligraphy. Jack watched as his daughter carefully opened the envelope, her small fingers working methodically to avoid tearing the expensive paper. She had the same careful approach to special things that he did, a respect for items that someone had taken time and care to prepare. "What is it?" Emma asked, her voice soft with wonder as she pulled out an official-looking document with raised lettering and a gold seal at the bottom. Maggie leaned forward, her hands clasped in front of her on the table, her voice gentle but filled with conviction. "It's a promise for your future, sweetheart. I've set up a scholarship fund in your name. When you're ready for college, whether that's to study science or art, or anything else your beautiful mind dreams up, it will be there waiting for you." Emma's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise as she looked from the paper to Maggie and back again, trying to process what she was hearing. Jack felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, a familiar burning sensation that came when he was overwhelmed by emotion. He'd been losing sleep lately, worried about how he'd manage to send Emma to college someday, even with the business doing better than he'd dared hope. "But," Emma started, her voice wobbling slightly with the weight of understanding what this meant. "But that's so much money. That's like more than we spend on groceries for a whole year. You are worth every penny and more," Maggie said firmly, reaching across the table to take Emma's small hand in both of hers. Her voice carried the same strength she'd once used to build a business empire, but now it was powered by love instead of ambition. "You're a brilliant girl with a beautiful heart and a mind that asks wonderful questions. I want to make sure you have every opportunity to chase your dreams, whatever they might turn out to be." Jack watched as his daughter's eyes filled with tears that caught the golden light like tiny jewels. She slipped off the picnic bench and hurried around the table with the quick, determined steps of a child who knew exactly what needed to happen next. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around Maggie's neck, nearly knocking the older woman backward with the force of her grateful embrace. The older woman's carefully composed expression crumbled, her face softening with an emotion so pure and powerful that Jack had to look away for a moment. She held Emma close, one hand stroking the girl's hair while the other clutched the small body tight against her chest. "I love you, Grandma Maggie," Emma whispered, her voice muffled against Maggie's shoulder but clear enough for Jack to hear every precious word. The words hung in the air like a blessing, carried on the evening breeze that rustled the oak leaves above them. Jack saw Maggie's eyes close tight, tears slipping down her cheeks as she hugged Emma even closer, as if she could somehow hold on to this perfect moment forever. Her lips moved in what looked like a silent prayer of gratitude. In that moment, under the spreading oak tree with the spring evening wrapping around them like a warm blanket woven from hope and love, Jack understood something profound about the nature of family. Sometimes it isn't about blood or legal documents or even shared history. Sometimes family is about the people who choose to love you when you're at your lowest, who show up when you need them most, who believe in you even when you've stopped believing in yourself. Family is about hearts that recognize each other across all the barriers that the world tries to build between us. As he watched his daughter and the woman who had become their unexpected blessing hold each other in the fading light, Jack felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't experienced in years. This was what grace looked like, he realized, not just in the big miracles, but in the quiet moments when love triumphed over loneliness, when generosity defeated despair, when three broken people found a way to become whole together. The morning sun painted delicate streaks of rose and amber across the Brooksville sky as Jack Holloway's truck rumbled down the familiar stretch of Maple Street. The engine hummed a steady rhythm, a comforting sound that had become part of their daily routine. The familiar route to Emma's new school took them past landmarks that now held layers of meaning far deeper than simple geography. The corner grocery where they'd once counted every penny and stretched every dollar, its faded awning, now somehow less intimidating than it used to be. The neighborhood park where they'd shared countless conversations on weathered benches beneath towering oak trees, and finally, rising ahead like a monument to both destruction and renewal, the apartment building that had changed everything. Jack eased his foot off the gas pedal, feeling the truck slow to a gentle crawl. The rebuilt structure stood proud and pristine against the morning light, its fresh red brick gleaming and new windows catching the sunrise like mirrors. The construction had erased almost every trace of that fateful fire that had torn through the building with such devastating force. Almost, but not quite. The third-floor corner window, where he'd found Maggie unconscious and trapped behind that jammed door, still seemed to call to him across the months. He could almost see the ghost of smoke still curling from those frames, could almost feel the heat that had pressed against his face like a living thing. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you, Dad?" Emma's voice was gentle and knowing, carrying the wisdom that seemed to live in children who had grown up too fast. She sat comfortably in the passenger seat, her new backpack decorated with glittering space stickers and constellation patterns nestled carefully in her lap. Her school uniform was crisp and clean, a far cry from the hand-me-down clothes she'd worn just a year ago. "Yeah, kiddo." Jack smiled, the expression creasing the corners of his eyes in lines that had grown deeper with laughter rather than worry over the past months. Hard to believe it's been a whole year since that night. The morning traffic flowed steadily around them as they idled by the curb, other parents dropping off their children, delivery trucks making their rounds, the ordinary rhythm of a small town coming to life. Through the windshield, Jack could see the exact spot where he'd first woken up to the chaos of sirens and billowing smoke, where paramedics had worked over him while he'd asked about the woman he'd pulled from the flames. His leg, long since healed and stronger than before thanks to months of physical therapy, gave a phantom twinge at the memory, not of pain, but of remembrance. "Remember how scared I was when they called from the hospital that night?" Emma reached over and squeezed his weathered hand with her smaller one, her touch warm and reassuring. "I kept thinking about how Mom went to the hospital and never came home. But then Miss Maggie came to visit, and everything started getting better, didn't it?" Jack chuckled, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Miss Maggie? Don't you mean Grandma Maggie now? I thought that's what you decided to call her after she helped you with that science project last month." Emma's face lit up at the mention of their adopted family member, her eyes sparkling with genuine affection. "She's coming to my science fair next week, you know. She promised to help me practice my presentation about the solar system tonight after dinner." She said she wants to hear all about Jupiter's moons and why Saturn's rings are so special. The sun climbed higher in the sky as they sat there in comfortable silence, casting long shadows across the street and illuminating the morning dew that still clung to the grass. Jack thought about how much had transformed in just 1 year. His small repair shop, not just surviving, but thriving, with steady customers and even a waiting list for his services. Emma excelling in her new school and making friends with an ease that warmed his heart, and Maggie becoming such an integral part of their daily lives that he couldn't imagine their little family without her presence. The lottery money had helped establish his business and secure their home, sure, but it wasn't the biggest blessing they'd received from that terrible and wonderful night. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled him gently from his thoughts, her tone carrying that particular note that meant she was about to share something important. "Can we stop by the shop after school today? I want to show Sarah the new mural you and Grandma Maggie had painted. She hasn't seen it yet, and I think she'd really like it." Jack nodded, his mind immediately going to the beautiful painting that now adorned his shop's side wall. A magnificent rising sun breaking over a detailed cityscape, with the words "Second Chances Start Here" written in elegant script beneath it. The local artist had captured something hopeful and enduring in those brushstrokes. It had been Maggie's idea, a symbol of their shared journey from that dark night to this bright morning. And every time Jack saw it, he felt a surge of gratitude for the woman who had insisted on paying for it. "You know what's funny, Em?" Jack shifted the truck back into drive, checking his mirrors carefully before pulling away from the curb. "I used to think that building was just another stop on my old delivery route, just another address on a list. Now, every time I pass it, I remember how one single moment of courage can change everything, not just for you, but for everyone around you." They drove slowly past the local diner where they now had leisurely Sunday brunches with Maggie, the same booth by the window where she'd first told them stories about her late son and where Emma had shyly asked if it would be okay to think of her as family. They passed the community center where Jack's repair shop had volunteered to renovate the veterans' meeting room, a project that had brought him face to face with other men who understood the weight of service and sacrifice. Finally, they approached Emma's school, a beautiful brick building with wide stone steps and tall windows that gleamed in the morning light, surrounded by carefully tended gardens that bloomed with seasonal flowers. "Dad?" Emma gathered her things carefully as they pulled into the bustling drop-off lane, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't gone into that building that night? If you just waited for the fire department like everyone else?" Jack turned to look at his daughter, really look at her, taking in the confidence in her posture, the security in her smile, the way she wore her happiness like a comfortable sweater. Her eyes held the same quiet strength he'd always seen there, inherited from her mother's gentle spirit. But now there was something more, confidence born of stability, security rooted in love, and a joy that seemed to radiate from within. The past year had given her so much more than material comfort or financial security. It had given her hope. "Sometimes I do wonder," he admitted honestly, watching other children stream past their truck toward the school entrance. "But then I remember something your mom used to say about God's timing being perfect, even when we can't see the bigger picture, even when we don't understand why things happen the way they do." Emma nodded solemnly, her expression thoughtful and mature. "Like how he knew we needed Grandma Maggie to love us, and she needed us to love her back. Like how everything worked out exactly the way it was supposed to, even though it was scary at first." "Exactly like that, sweetheart." Jack reached over to tuck a stray strand of her dark hair behind her ear, marveling at how much she looked like her mother in moments like these. "You know, kiddo, sometimes the greatest lottery win isn't money at all." Emma's face broke into a knowing smile, the kind that seemed far too wise for an 11-year-old girl. "It's love, right? It's having people who care about you and want to see you happy?" Jack nodded, watching the sunrise complete its morning symphony across the endless sky, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility. He thought about Maggie, probably already at her office planning another community initiative, and about the evening ahead when they'd all gather around their dinner table to help Emma practice her presentation. He thought about the simple miracle of having enough love, enough hope, enough faith to believe in tomorrow. "Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't in the numbers we draw," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of gratitude and wonder. "It's in the hearts we save along the way. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending." If you enjoyed the story of Jack Holloway, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.